Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales. Chapter 57-55. Kong Xinmu. Wan Zong glanced at Kong Xinmu and spoke slowly. He was dressed as usual, and his body was still stained with some sand, and there was a faint space barrier floating around him. It was not difficult to see that he came from the space layer under the sand. Wan Zong's eyes narrowed, and a glimmer of light flashed across his eyes. He understood a little about Kong Xinmu's current situation. Kong Xinmu had seen Wan Zong several times. Originally, he only thought that Wan Zong was a cultivator from the outer domain, but since Wan Zong appeared in Leng Zhanghong's battlefield, he had a new understanding of this person. The two looked at each other. Suddenly, Wan Zong moved first. At this moment, Kong Xinmu's Qi meridian condensed power and responded. The battle between the two of them had begun. Wan Zong directly released the supreme divine power of the 9th level as soon as he attacked. It was a kind of supreme divine power that Kong Xinmu had never seen, never touched, and never heard of. He could only barely sense that the other party's supreme divine power had reached the 9th level with his own soul consciousness. Moreover, when Wan Zong displayed the supreme divine power of the 9th level, he also released the power of the supreme domain corresponding to the supreme divine power. In a moment, the space in which the two were located changed. When Kong Xinmu and Wan Zong fought, he released the supreme power of space. Through the supreme power of space, he found that the space in which he was located at this time was very mysterious, like the space in a secret realm. But unlike the secret realm, the space in which he was located at this time was filled with a strange aura that did not belong to the secret realm. This kind of aura, Kong Xinmu had felt before. It was when the divine light appeared, and when Leng Zhanghong opened the contract gate, he had felt the same aura. The world that the contract gate connected to was the other world, and the aura coming from the space was naturally the aura of the other world. In other words, at this time, they were in the other world? Affected by the power of Wan Zong's supreme domain, Kong Xinmu's supreme power of space stagnated, unable to be released, and even felt like it was being swallowed. Kong Xinmu could only retract his supreme spatial energy. His soul consciousness was stronger than his own supreme divine power realm. His soul consciousness barely penetrated the range of Wan Zong's supreme domain power. The outside world was indeed not where he was standing just now. He had stayed in the outer realm for a period of time, so he had gained some understanding of the aura circulating in the outer realm. At this moment, the space was filled with various auras. Kong Xinmu's soul consciousness also sensed that Wan Zong's supreme domain power wasn't like Leng Zhanghong's or other cultivators, which covered half of the space. Wan Zong's supreme domain power didn't cover a large area of space. It was more like a transfer force that could transfer cultivators who were in the supreme domain power to other spaces or even other worlds. Wait a minute. Suddenly, Kong Xinmu sensed that something was wrong with the 7 devouring devil sealing art. The seal of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, which he had painstakingly shut off, suddenly lit up without any warning. 2 different images were displayed on the black and white mirrors. The black mirror showed the scene that Kong Xinmu's soul consciousness had just perceived. On the other hand, the white mirror showed where he was standing just now, which was the forest in the Outland realm. Seeing the 2 images, Kong Xinmu suddenly thought that this layer of supreme domain power was like a teleportation array. One side was connected to the original world, and the other was connected to another world. Generally speaking, the creation of supreme domain power depended on the supreme divine power. In the face of such a supreme domain power, Kong Xinmu couldn't think of what kind of supreme divine power could give rise to such a supreme domain power. Bipolar mirror, is it? Not long after the 7 devouring demon sealing art was activated, he heard Wan Zong's somewhat surprised voice. Then, he launched another attack. Kong Xinmu was tired of dealing with Wan Zong's supreme divine power. Although Kong Xinmu didn't know what kind of supreme divine power Wan Zong was using, the 9th level supreme divine power that Wan Zong released was enough to suppress Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu's supreme divine flame had also reached the 9th level. Even so, the 9th level supreme divine flame was still defeated by Wan Zong's 9th level supreme divine power. The supreme divine flame was a new kind of supreme divine power that was refined and devoured after the power of the supreme divine fire merged with the flame of the dead. It was a brand new kind of supreme divine power, and its strength was far from what the power of the supreme divine fire could compare to. The only thing that could compare to the supreme godly flame was the supreme holy ice power. Such a level of supreme divine power was still suppressed by Wan Zong's supreme divine power, which meant that Wan Zong's supreme divine power was of a higher grade. Even the 9th level supreme divine flame could not deal with the other party's supreme divine power, so Kong Shinmu did not release other supreme divine powers. There were indeed many types of supreme divine powers that he had comprehended, but they were only at the entry level and could not fight with Wan Zong. When Kong Shinmu focused his mind, he unintentionally released the supreme soul power. This was a kind of supreme divine power that could not advance until now. From the beginning when he seized the supreme soul power until now, it had remained at the initial level. Along the way, Kong Shinmu had not been able to fully understand the supreme soul power. But he also had a general direction. The advancement of the supreme soul power was mostly like the 7 devouring demons sealing art, which needed to devour the corresponding power. The moment the supreme soul power was released, Wan Zong's expression changed, and he looked at Kong Shinmu with a dignified expression. Kong Shinmu did not know that he was controlling the supreme soul power. When he made his move, he suddenly found that his attack worked on Wan Zong. Similarly, Wan Zong was also surprised by Kong Shinmu's offensive. He was also a little surprised by the supreme divine flame released by Kong Shinmu. It seemed that in just a year, Kong Shinmu had grown to a terrifying realm. However, the 9th level supreme divine flame was still a supreme divine power that had reached the 9th level. Without its own concept, it would never be able to step into the door of the rules. The power that Kong Shinmu released just now, was it the supreme soul power? Wan Zong condensed his soul consciousness and swept towards Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu controlled the supreme divine flame, wanting to resist Wan Zong's offensive. The supreme soul power he released turned into an enchantment, blocking all of Wan Zong's offensive. Wan Zong's eyes narrowed, and his palm momentum had already arrived in front of Kong Shinmu's face. Kong Shinmu's palm momentum wrapped in the supreme soul power met Wan Zong's palm momentum. The moment the two sides collided, a strong explosion broke out, abruptly blowing a gap in Wan Zong's supreme domain power. Wan Zong could no longer remain calm. "Who the hell are you?" Wan Zong narrowed his eyes and asked in a deep voice. "Kong Shinmu." Kong Shinmu did not avoid the topic. Seeing Wan Zong's reaction, Kong Shinmu was shocked. He never thought that the supreme soul power could have an impact on the terrifying Wan Zong. Chapter 57-56. What Wan Zong wanted to ask was naturally not Kong Shinmu's name. This name had long been spread during the battle in the ancient desolate ancient city, and for a period of time after that, it was often mentioned. The supreme soul power that Kong Shinmu displayed was very strange. The supreme soul power, in essence, was just a kind of supreme divine power. It had never been heard of that supreme divine power could cause damage to the supreme domain power. In fact, the supreme soul power that Kong Shinmu displayed just now had affected the range of the supreme domain. Kong Shinmu focused his mind. Like Wan Zong, Kong Shinmu was also thinking about this problem. This wasn't the first time that the unparalleled soul power was able to harm the unparalleled domain power. He had encountered it a few times before, but he did not care much. But at this time, the supreme soul power had indeed damaged Wan Zong's supreme domain power. This was a kind of domain power that even his supreme divine fire domain could not break through, but it was actually broken by the Supreme Heart Soul Power, proving that the Supreme Heart Soul Power was extraordinary. For a long time, not only had Kang Shinmu been unable to improve the Supreme Soul Power, but he had also been unable to comprehend the Supreme Soul Power's domain power. Even other Supreme Divine Powers, such as the Supreme Darksteel Power, although they could not completely comprehend the corresponding Supreme Domain Power, they at least comprehended a part of the domain power. However, the Supreme Soul Power was different. He could not even feel the slightest bit of the domain power. From a certain point of view, the strength of the Supreme Soul Power had a certain connection with the cultivator's own soul consciousness. Kang Shinmu did not believe that with the strength of his soul consciousness at this time, he could not comprehend the Supreme Soul Power's domain power. Now, he had a general direction. The Supreme Soul Power itself and the Supreme Soul Power's domain power were one. Wanzong glanced at the Supreme Domain that was broken by the Supreme Soul Power. With a thought, the broken area returned to its original state. The battle between the two did not determine the winner. In terms of the strength of their Supreme Divine Powers, both of them were at the 9th level. Putting aside Supreme Divine Power, in terms of Supreme Domain Power, Kang Shinmu was far inferior to Wanzong. Wanzong's Supreme Domain Power was as high as the Supreme Divine Power realm, and there were also laws within it. Wanzong realized that Kang Shinmu's Supreme Soul Power was different from ordinary Supreme Divine Power, so he didn't hold back. Wanzong casually twirled his fingers, and the momentum in the domain suddenly changed. A murderous intent swept out like a gale. At the same time, Kang Shinmu unleashed his supreme power of the soul. At the same time, the 7 devouring demon sealing art suddenly lit up and began to revolve. The two different sides of the engraving gradually fused together, and the images of the two worlds gradually disappeared, turning into a strange environment. It was the space within the domain that Kang Shinmu was currently in. When this scene appeared in the engraving, the 7 devouring demon sealing art suddenly activated. Some time ago, the 7 devouring demon sealing art had devoured a lot of laws and entered the 2nd level. Although it was not stable, its power had increased. At present, the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing art that Kang Shinmu had mastered was a kind of auxiliary power. Under the effect of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, the devouring power suddenly swept out and quickly enveloped Kang Shinmu, and then spread out along with the supreme power of the soul. Wanzong's supreme domain power had already erupted. Although Kang Shinmu's supreme power of the soul spread relatively slowly, and was even suppressed by the other party's domain power, it was forced to be unable to spread. The more condensed the domain power, the stronger the laws within it. The devouring power under the effect of the 7 devouring demon sealing art rushed out of the scope of the supreme power of the soul and dispersed. Wanzong noticed the spread of the devouring power, but he didn't take it seriously. How could a mere devouring power break through his domain power? When the devouring power spread, it began to devour the laws within the domain. The devouring speed was very fast, so fast that by the time Wanzong noticed it, more than half of it had been devoured. Although the laws within the domain would be devoured by the devouring power, Wanzong's cultivation realm was, after all, stronger than Kang Shinmu. Soon, he suppressed Kang Shinmu. The devouring power under the effect of the 7 devouring demon sealing art could not devour the domain power after devouring the laws within. Wanzong's power suddenly surged towards Kang Shinmu. Kang Shinmu had long noticed that the devouring power could not devour the domain power, so he restrained the devouring power. In the face of Wanzong's power, Kang Shinmu could only rely on the engraving power of the 10-directional devil seal. Although the 10-directional devil seal was a heaven and earth sacred item, Kang Shinmu was not sure whether the engraving power of the 10-directional devil seal could compete with Wanzong. Just as Kang Shinmu activated the 10-directional devil seal, the various powers that existed in the 10-directional devil seal gradually leaked out. The Supreme Heart Soul Power, which was originally controlled by Wanzong's domain power, seemed to have sensed some kind of power and suddenly moved. At this moment, Kang Shinmu sensed the existence of the supreme heart-soul power that was different from the supreme divine power. The feeling of being filled with the domain was clearly the power of the supreme domain. It seemed that the supreme heart-soul power was also the domain power of the supreme heart-soul power at the same time. At this moment, the supreme heart-soul power had already changed greatly. The moment it expanded, the entire space seemed to be dyed with a layer of blood. It quickly spread out and forced back the killing intent that existed in Wanzong's domain power. When the supreme heart-soul power, which had changed, spread out, Wanzong had already controlled the power of the supreme domain in an attempt to trap it. However, no matter how hard he tried, he could not control the supreme heart-soul power again. It was clear that all of Kang Shinmu's powers were below his, and even this supreme heart-soul power realm was very weak. However, at this moment, it was this inconspicuous supreme heart-soul power that directly forced back the domain power and even broke the domain power. After the blood qi dispersed, the two returned to the front of the forest. The moment the domain power was broken, Wanzong restrained his own power. Although Kang Shinmu did not restrain his own power, he also restrained his gestures. Wanzong once again looked at Kang Shinmu and smiled meaningfully. Dragon God Clan? From the moment Kang Shinmu activated the 10-directional devil seal, Wanzong noticed Kang Shinmu. Kang Shinmu had the shadow of that person. No wonder Kang Shinmu would come to the outer territory. The left protector of the United Alliance is on good terms with the Everlasting Pavilion, especially Nangong Jia. Nangong Dujia, a member of the Nangong family who is currently a guest of the Everlasting Pavilion, is an upright person. Wanzong glanced at Kang Shinmu and said lightly, "Why are you telling me this?" Kang Shinmu concentrated and said in a deep voice, "It's very simple. The left protector and I don't like each other." Wanzong did not hide anything and smiled playfully. Chapter 57-57. If what Wanzong said at the beginning was that the two left protectors didn't like each other, then the meaning of the latter words was a bit unpredictable. The master of the Tianyuan Palace Master and Feng were best friends, so there was nothing wrong with what he said. However, thinking about it, whether these two were best friends or not, it had nothing to do with Kang Shinmu. Wanzong took a deep look at Kang Shinmu, and his figure suddenly disappeared. The moment his figure disappeared, Kang Shinmu once again sensed the power of Wanzong's supreme realm. Although he had fought with Wanzong, until now, Kang Shinmu still couldn't detect what kind of power Wanzong used. His supreme domain power was even more mysterious and unfathomable, difficult to distinguish. Wanzong had already left, and Kang Shinmu didn't restrain his power. Looking at the jungle in front of him, Kang Shinmu released the power of the Supreme Soul. For a moment, the power of the Supreme Soul suddenly swept out. When he used the power of the Supreme Soul to attack just now, it was blood-red in color. At this time, Kang Shinmu released a large area of the power of the Supreme Soul, which was red. From the outside, a red light suddenly appeared from the edge of the jungle, and then spread toward the jungle with the momentum of a gust of wind. As Kang Shinmu guessed, there were still various kinds of space barriers floating above the jungle. However, it was worth noting that most of these space barriers floated in the space layer above the sand. They didn't spread to the sky above the jungle. In other words, the space barriers in the sealed secret realm hadn't invaded the space layer of the foreign domain for the time being. This was just a temporary discovery by Kang Shinmu. As for whether it would invade later, it was still unknown. After sensing the active range of the space barriers, Kang Shinmu avoided the space barriers and passed through the jungle. While passing through the jungle, Kang Shinmu also sensed the aura of many monsters, as well as some miscellaneous auras. At the same time, he discovered the abnormality of the power of the Supreme Soul. The use of Supreme Soul power had always been the same as soul consciousness. After the battle with Wan Zong just now, Kang Xinmu realized the uniqueness of the Supreme Soul Power. At this moment, the uniqueness displayed by the Supreme Soul Power was even more intense. The peerless power of the soul could actually penetrate through the barriers of space. What kind of existence was a spatial barrier? To put it simply, it was equivalent to a spatial barrier. If one were to enter it, one would be trapped within it. As long as one could find another spatial barrier that connected to the outside world, one would be able to escape. On a deeper level, the spatial barrier was a kind of mystic realm. The combination of several spatial barriers was not as simple as a large-scale secret realm. Instead, the layers of space overlapped with each other. Once one entered one of them by mistake, it was possible that one would be lost forever. However, the peerless power of the soul did not seem to fear this, and directly pierced through the spatial barrier. When he realized this, Kang Xinmu couldn't help but pay more attention to the supreme power of the soul. The supreme power of the soul was the power that he had devoured. All along, he had known that the supreme power of the soul could condense a barrier. It was the first time that he had seen the supreme power of the soul act like a spatial power, passing through the spatial barrier at will. Kang Xinmu trusted the supreme power of the soul a lot, thinking that he could rely on the supreme power of the soul to smoothly avoid all the spatial barriers. However, he did not expect that he would soon be in the spatial barrier. Moreover, he personally felt that the supreme power of the soul had brought him through the layers of spatial barriers, and without any effort, he came to the other end of the forest. Kang Xinmu turned his head to look at the forest. Those spatial barriers were still there. The scarlet light was dissipating. Kang Xinmu condensed the supreme power of the soul. In the palm of his hand, the scarlet halo made him puzzled. Why did he feel that the supreme power of the soul was a little different from before? Carefully thinking about his experience during this period of time, it seemed that he did not encounter anything strange. A year ago, he went into seclusion. In a year's time, other than the supreme divine flame reaching the 9th level, his other supreme divine powers had more or less improved a little. At the same time, he also learned of a drawback of his current cultivation. Only when the supreme divine power that he comprehended reached the 9th level could he step into the door of the rules. Apart from that, there was nothing unusual. During that period of time, he also released the supreme power of the soul, and there was nothing unusual. Suddenly, Kang Xinmu thought of the scene when the sealed secret realm collapsed. At that time, there seemed to be an abnormally cold aura that flew out from the secret realm, and that aura entered the 7 devouring demons sealing art. Speaking of which, before that energy was absorbed by the 7 devouring demons sealing art, the engraving was white when it lit up. After absorbing that strange energy, the engraving was black when it lit up. Until now, the engraving was black and white, which was the so-called bipolar mirror. Could it have been affected by this energy, causing the supreme power of the soul to change? On the other side of the forest was a very prosperous city. Unlike the city that Kang Xinmu encountered Wuxia in, the entrance of this city was heavily guarded. Not only that, but the words above the city were also very eye-catching. Sun City. At this time, there were 2 queues that were as long as dragons outside the city gates of Sun City. Anyone who wanted to enter Sun City had to go through an inspection. Kang Xinmu had just arrived, so he did not know why this city was being inspected or what it was being inspected for. He was about to go forward and ask when he heard the crowd discussing something. Did you hear? The sealed secret realm collapsed. After the secret realm collapsed, more than half of the cultivators in it fell into our foreign land. I already know about this, and I even met people from the other side. Speaking of which, it's my first time meeting people from the other side. I feel like the people from the other side are no different from us. The only difference is their cultivation base. I feel like they're very weak. That's nothing. I've seen that senior called Kang Xinmu with my own eyes. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the crowd of people who were in a heated discussion. In an instant, everyone's attention was drawn to it, and they all looked over. Kang Xinmu also looked over curiously. How did he suddenly become a senior? He had to say that the rumors were getting more and more ridiculous as they spread. Senior Kang Xinmu stayed in the neighboring city, and he eventually left the city with a cultivator from the other side. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man with a mustache. As he spoke, he was still keeping people in suspense. Kang Xinmu had never seen this person before, but he could see that the supreme divine power that this person exuded was at least at the 7th level. At this time, many cultivators who were queuing at the city gates had basically reached the 6th level of supreme divine power and above. He could not help but be surprised. There were indeed many experts in the foreign land. As the middle-aged man with the mustache spoke, he glanced at the surrounding crowd and naturally saw Kang Xinmu. What surprised Kang Xinmu was that this person quickly looked away. Chapter 57-58. The queue to enter the city was very long. Kang Xinmu was hesitating whether to continue queuing when he sensed a sharp aura coming from behind him. The sharp aura was heading straight for Kang Xinmu. Kang Xinmu calmed himself down and circulated the supreme divine spirit flame in his meridians. Once the aura approached, he would have to block it. The cultivators who were queuing around Kang Xinmu were also watching intently. The guards at the entrance of Yang City were also looking over. General Duan Tian, who was in charge of guarding Yang City, quickly sensed the strange aura coming towards Yang City. His figure flashed and he dashed out of the city. "Who are you? How dare you behave atrociously in Yang City?" Duan Tian bellowed. This voice carried with it a strong, unparalleled divine power that spread out in front. "General Duan, it's me." As a chuckle sounded, a person dressed in tattered clothes with disheveled hair and a dirty face swept over from the front. Kang Xinmu could tell from the voice and aura that this person was Tang Xiaoyu. However, seeing Tang Xiaoyu's appearance, Kang Xinmu was in disbelief. He could not imagine what Tang Xiaoyu had encountered during this period of time. "You," Duan Tian frowned when he saw this person. "Tang Xiaoyu?" Tang Xiaoyu was a wanted criminal of Tianyuan Palace. Yang City was a subsidiary city of Tianyuan Palace. His appearance in Yang City at this time was undoubtedly an extremely irrational behavior. "You sure have guts." Duan Tian laughed mockingly. "Don't laugh too early. Eldest senior brother isn't in Yang City." Tang Xiaoyu shrugged casually. Tang Xiaoyu was right. Eldest senior brother Lian Yi was indeed not in Yang City. "Your attire is very unique." Duan Tian sized up Tang Xiaoyu. His eyes were filled with disdain. "Put it down. You have a share too." Tang Xiaoyu smiled faintly and then looked at Kang Xinmu, indicating for Kang Xinmu to leave as soon as possible. Not long ago, Tang Xiaoyu encountered people from the Union Alliance. He was no match for them and was beaten up to this extent. Thinking that it wasn't far from Yang City, he planned to use Yang City to block those people from the Allied Alliance. He had never expected to see Kang Xinmu here. "Humph." Duan Tian sneered when he heard Tang Xiaoyu's words. Tang Xiaoyu casually patted his body and prepared to enter the city. "Don't celebrate too early, Tang Xiaoyu. Although I don't have the authority to capture you, I can inform the people of the Heavenly Origin Palace." Duan Tian sneered and casually glanced at Kang Xinmu before looking in the direction where Tang Xiaoyu was rushing over. That cold and gloomy aura had followed Tang Xiaoyu closely, so it must have something to do with him. "Come on, let's enter the city." Tang Xiaoyu came over, not at all trying to hide his current image. He placed a hand on Jiang Shenwu's shoulder. Kang Xinmu did not look down on Tang Xiaoyu. The two of them walked toward Sun City with their arms around each other's shoulders. "Brother Jiang, I didn't expect you to come to the outer realm." This is my territory, I'll protect you in the future. Tang Xiaoyu laughed heartily. There were several kinds of complicated Supreme Divine Power auras on his body. These Supreme Divine Power auras were all Supreme Divine Powers that Kang Xinmu had not encountered before. Some of the auras were similar to the left protector's aura. Then I'll have to trouble you, Brother Tang. Kang Xinmu smiled. From a certain point of view, he admired Tang Xiaoyu for living a carefree life. At the city gate of Sun City. Before the two of them could enter, they were stopped by a long sword that descended from the sky. The blade of the sword flashed with a cold murderous intent, and the body of the sword flickered with scarlet light. From the sword, it could be seen that the owner of the sword must have experienced countless killings to be able to cultivate the sword to such a level. Soul-slaying sword. Tang Xiaoyu recognized the sword at a glance. You enter the city first. Then, he slapped at Kang Xinmu and pushed Kang Xinmu into the city gate. Just at this moment, a black shadow attacked from the horizon, and a young man in a black robe revealed his figure immediately after. He lifted the soul-slaying sword and stared at Tang Xiaoyu coldly. Tang Xiaoyu, today is the day you die. As soon as the young man finished speaking, he moved and stabbed at Tang Xiaoyu with the soul-slaying sword in his hand. Although Tang Xiaoyu looked like he was in a mess, he was agile and had a ghostly movement technique. The young man could not capture Tang Xiaoyu's movements immediately. Duan Tian came to Sun City after dealing with the other troubles. He Meng, how dare you? Duan Tian glared at the young man in a black robe coldly and shouted. The young man ignored him and kept stabbing at Tang Xiaoyu with the soul-slaying sword. The Sun City gate was in a mess because of He Meng's sudden attack. Hurry up. Duan Tian urged the guards guarding Yang City to hurry up. Kang Xinmu looked at He Meng's aura and sensed the aura that Tang Xiaoyu released. Soon, Kang Xinmu noticed something shocking. He had thought that He Meng's aura was similar to the left protector's aura. Now, it seemed like He Meng's aura was completely different from the left protector's. He Meng had the Union Alliance's badge on his waist, proving that he was a member of the Union Alliance. Tang Xiaoyu's aura was similar to the left protector's. This could only mean that Tang Xiaoyu had fought with the left protector before. Judging from He Meng's aggressive and overbearing manner, Tang Xiaoyu must have severely injured the left protector. Duan Tian tried to reason with He Meng, but He Meng did not listen and attacked even more ruthlessly. Duan Tian, I've already reported this to the other members of the Union Alliance. You, Sun City, and even Heaven Yuan Palace won't be able to escape, let alone Tang Xiaoyu. He Meng grinned hideously. Is the Union Alliance going to war with Heaven Yuan Palace? Duan Tian asked in a deep voice as he realized the seriousness of the matter. General Duan Tian, is your brain rusty? It's clearly your Heaven Yuan Palace that wants to go to war with the Union Alliance, right? He Meng looked as if he had heard something unbelievable. Duan Tian pursed his lips, guessing that Tang Xiaoyu must have gotten into some trouble. You still don't know what Tang Xiaoyu did? He Meng spoke again when he saw Duan Tian's reaction. Duan Tian's face was filled with confusion. When Kang Xinmu saw He Meng's reaction, he felt that his guess was close to the truth. Hey, He Meng, what I do doesn't seem to have anything to do with Heaven Yuan Palace, right? Everyone in the outer region doesn't know that I'm wanted by Heaven Yuan Palace. Tang Xiaoyu shrugged disapprovingly. Are you in such a hurry to cut ties with Heaven Yuan Palace? Did you regret it when you killed him? Tang Xiaoyu from Tang Village. He Meng's expression was somewhat crazed. He did not want to waste any more words. With a wave of his hand, the soul-exterminating sword emitted a powerful sword aura that shot towards Tang Xiaoyu. You flatter me. Tang Xiaoyu smiled mischievously, then his figure disappeared from the spot. As his figure disappeared, he did not forget to send a voice transmission to Kang Xinmu, telling Kong Shinmu to stay in Yang City as much as possible. Yang City was a subsidiary city of Heaven Yuan Palace. If he stayed in Yang City and the Union Alliance came looking for trouble, at least the people from Heaven Yuan Palace would be there. Tang Xiaoyu from Tang Village? This was the first time Kong Shinmu had heard of such a title. He smiled helplessly, then strode out of Yang City's city gate. When Duan Tian saw Kong Shinmu's actions, he could not help but frown. Just now, Tang Xiaoyu had tried his best to send this person into Yang City, but now he had left the city? He really could not understand what was going on. Tang Xiaoyu, let's see where you can run to today. When Tang Xiaoyu's figure disappeared, He Meng's figure turned, and the soul-exterminating sword stabbed to the side. Chapter 57-59. This idiot. Just as Duan Tian was about to chase after him, he saw that Kong Shinmu had already moved. It was only now that Duan Tian realized Kong Shinmu's terrifying strength. After mastering the supreme power of space, Kong Shinmu could see through Tang Xiaoyu's 10,000 Elephants origin superposition technique and quickly found traces of his movements. Kong Shinmu found Tang Xiaoyu's traces before He Meng and blocked He Meng's palm attack for Tang Xiaoyu. "Who are you?" He Meng stopped and asked coldly. He Meng sized up Kong Shinmu, but he couldn't figure out Kong Shinmu's cultivation base. However, He Meng was fearless. There were many cultivators who were good at hiding their cultivation base in the outer realm. Generally speaking, supreme cultivators who had reached the 9th level of supreme divine power could hide their own strength at will. Anyone who stopped him from capturing Tang Xiaoyu was an enemy, no matter who they were. As soon as He Meng finished speaking, he released a supreme martial technique and charged straight at Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu didn't plan to stand by and do nothing just because He Meng was a member of the United Alliance. Not to mention his friendship with Tang Xiaoyu, from a certain point of view, he would become an enemy of the United Alliance sooner or later. He Meng repeatedly tried to kill Tang Xiaoyu, who was seriously injured. Once Kong Shinmu attacked, he didn't plan to hold back. He released all of his 9th stage Supreme Divine Spirit flames, forcefully blocking He Meng's attack and pushing it back towards He Meng. Tang Xiaoyu originally planned to use the ingenuity of the 10,000 Elephants origin superposition technique to escape with He Meng and Zhou Xian. However, he didn't expect that he underestimated He Meng's strength. He Meng wasn't good at spatial spells. The supreme divine power he cultivated was just like his name, a strength-type supreme divine power. It was this kind of supreme divine power that could pierce through space. Tang Xiaoyu couldn't successfully cast the 10,000 Elephants origin superposition technique. In his current state, if he forced it, it was very likely to cause unbearable consequences. In the face of this crisis, Kong Shinmu stood up. Kong Shinmu's move was beyond Tang Xiaoyu's expectations. The United Alliance was not like the Limitless Pavilion. If they offended the United Alliance, the consequences would be unimaginable. Kong Shinmu was a smart man. He should know the pros and cons of this. Brother Jiang. Tang Xiaoyu appeared in front of Kong Shinmu, intending to stop Kong Shinmu's next wave of attacks. "It's too late," Kong Shinmu said lightly. With that, he withdrew his hand gesture. Fortunately, he stopped in time. Tang Xiaoyu heaved a sigh of relief. In the next moment, Tang Xiaoyu was stunned. He Meng, who was knocked out by Kong Shinmu, was no longer breathing. The supreme divine power around his body had completely leaked out, and his vitality had completely disappeared. Tang Xiaoyu glanced at He Meng, then at Kong Shinmu. He was at a loss for words, and his emotions were complicated. The fact that Kong Shinmu could kill He Meng with ease meant that his strength had improved a lot during this period. However, the person who was killed by Kong Shinmu was He Meng. He was a member of the Union Alliance. The Union Alliance had always been vengeful. This was not a good thing. Even if He Meng was from the everlasting pavilion, it would not be a big problem. Brother Jiang, over here. Tang Xiaoyu pointed at Yang City in a hurry. It was not an exaggeration to say that in the entire outer region, the only people who could help Kong Xinmu were the Heavenly Origin Palace and the 10 people. Kong Xinmu had planned to go to the Heavenly Origin Palace, but now that he had provoked the people of the Union Alliance, he could not help but worry. Duan Tian's attention was focused on Kong Xinmu. The scene that had just happened replayed in his mind, and he still could not come back to his senses. From the moment he saw Kong Xinmu, Duan Tian could not clearly see Kong Xinmu's cultivation level. He could roughly guess that Kong Xinmu was not someone to be trifled with. However, he did not expect that he could kill He Meng in an instant. Who did not know He Meng's strength? Who on earth was Kong Xinmu? When did such a powerhouse appear in the outer region? Suddenly, Duan Tian thought of the sealed secret realm. Some time ago, because of the collapse of the sealed secret realm, many cultivators from the secret realm came to the outer region. For now, most of the cultivators who came from the sealed arcane realm came from the other world. In the outer region, the other realm was not an unfamiliar world. It was related to the earliest history of the outer region. Duan Tian saw that Kong Xinmu, whether it was his cultivation level or his bearing, was very similar to a member of a certain clan in the other realm. He was sure that Kong Xinmu was a person from the other realm. Just now, Kong Xinmu had killed someone from the United Alliance. The Heaven Origin Palace had always been at odds with the United Alliance, so they could be considered allies. My dear friend, please come in. Duan Tian took the initiative to invite Kong Xinmu in. Kong Xinmu originally wanted to enter the city, but he hesitated because of the United Alliance. Let's go. I'll show you the customs of the Heaven Origin Palace. Tang Xiaoyu laughed heartily. Kong Xinmu was not a pretentious person. Through Tang Xiaoyu, he had a general understanding of the relationship between the United Alliance and the Heaven Origin Palace, so he did not refuse and entered Sun City. The turmoil outside Sun City was finally over. Patrolling troops could often be seen in Sun City. Moreover, members of the United Alliance were prohibited from entering Sun City. The reason they had to be checked when entering the city was to resist the United Alliance. Not long before the sealed mystic realm collapsed, the United Alliance and the Heaven Origin Palace had a conflict. At that time, the Heaven Origin Palace disciples were out on a mission and encountered members of the United Alliance. The United Alliance people maliciously stirred up trouble, and a fight broke out between the two sides. The United Alliance people used their geographical advantage and called for a few deacon elders. As a result of the fight, many Heaven Origin Palace disciples were seriously injured. One person's cultivation base was crippled, and he would never be able to comprehend supreme divine power for the rest of his life. Another 2 people died. After this incident, the Heaven Origin Palace did not treat the United Alliance with the slightest courtesy. The relationship between the two sides went from being on opposite sides to being completely hostile. Sun City was not the only city affiliated to the Heaven Origin Palace, but the city lords of the other cities actually sided with the United Alliance after this incident. Heaven Origin Palace only found out that the city lords of those cities had secretly joined the United Alliance. In the end, Sun City was the only one left of the several affiliated cities. However, Sun City was not the only city that banned the people of the United Alliance. There was also a city thousands of miles away that followed Sun City and also banned the United Alliance. It was Upper Prefecture City. Upper Prefecture City was a name that had been changed in the past 100 years. The city lord was Xin Che. Xin Che had left to travel a long time ago and had yet to return. However, the rules of Upper Prefecture City were set according to Sun City. According to the general who guarded the city, the ban on the United Alliance was personally imposed by the city lord. Tang Xiaoyu, how dare you come to Sun City? Duan Tian glanced at Tang Xiaoyu and raised his eyebrows. Also, how did you provoke that He Meng? First of all, it was the left protector who provoked the Heaven Origin Palace disciple first. That's why I attacked. Tang Xiaoyu, who was always smiling, looked terrifyingly gloomy when he mentioned this incident. Who? Duan Tian glanced at Tang Xiaoyu's expression and asked. Wan Genjiu. Tang Xiaoyu said in annoyance. Wan Genjiu's cultivation base had been crippled previously. Now that he had finally recovered and his cultivation base was gradually recovering, he still could not comprehend supreme divine power. His soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness were destroyed. Not only could he not comprehend the supreme divine power that he had previously mastered, he could not comprehend new supreme divine powers in the future either. The left protector had no intention of showing mercy to such a cripple. Duan Tian knew about Wan Genjiu's situation and understood why Tang Xiaoyu would do that. Tang Xiaoyu was not the only one. Anyone else would have done the same. The left protector had only himself to blame for ending up in such a state. Forget it, let's not talk about this anymore. Tang Xiaoyu did not want the atmosphere to be too heavy. I've saved him. His life is not in danger. Kang Xinmu seemed to have an impression of Wan Genjiu when he heard them talking about him. He seemed to have met this person when he went out to train in the past. However, it had been too long and he could not remember it clearly. Yang City was very strict. If anyone was found to have entered the city without reporting, they would be punished. General Duan Tian had already announced that no one from the United Alliance or anyone related to the United Alliance would be allowed to enter Sun City. No one knew how Kang Xinmu could compete with the Wuji Pavilion, but the Pavilion Master swore that he would make Kang Xinmu pay the price. The Everlasting Pavilion was one of the members of the United Alliance. After this incident, the United Alliance was prepared to intervene. Previously, the news that Kang Xinmu was in Yang City had also been spread to the Wuji Pavilion. Yang City was a subsidiary city of the Heaven Origin Palace. Kang Xinmu's intention was obvious. He wanted to rely on the Heaven Origin Palace. Or perhaps, he was a member of the Heaven Origin Palace. The Everlasting Pavilion had always been unhappy with the Heaven Origin Palace. This time, it was a good opportunity to teach the Heaven Origin Palace a lesson. Of all times, the news came. The Heaven Origin Palace's Tang Xiaoyu killed the United Alliance's left protector. He Meng, who went to seek justice for the left protector, was killed by Kang Xinmu at the city gate of Yang City. This news directly expanded the conflict between the Heaven Origin Palace and the Everlasting Pavilion, and even the United Alliance. The United Alliance had already sent the news to the base and was waiting for the orders from the higher-ups. The Everlasting Pavilion in the Outer Realm had already sent people over. Yang City. Duan Tian had received news from the Upper State City that the members of the Outer Realm's United Alliance were ready to go to war and had already deployed their troops. As the great general of Yang City, Duan Tian was obliged to lead the troops to defend the city. Duan Tian, I seem to have implicated you this time. Tang Xiaoyu had a rare serious look on his face. His tone was not like before, but very solemn. You are the person the palace master ordered to capture. Even if you have committed a heinous crime, you are still a member of the Heaven Origin Palace. Duan Tian punched Tang Xiaoyu and left in a hurry. It was not only Duan Tian who was not used to Tang Xiaoyu being like this, but Kang Xinmu was also not used to it. Ever since he knew Tang Xiaoyu, he had never seen this guy pass by. He suddenly became serious and looked a little strange. Duan Tian, if you die, I will definitely go to your grave to burn incense. Tang Xiaoyu looked at Duan Tian's back and suddenly shouted. I have to thank you. Duan Tian staggered. Tang Xiaoyu knew about the Everlasting Pavilion situation. He took the risk to return to the Heaven Origin Palace, looking for traces of Kong Shinmu along the way. He directly led him to the Heaven Origin Palace. "Brother Jiang, do you know about the bipolar mirror?" Suddenly, Tang Xiaoyu said in a low voice. Kong Shinmu's expression froze. Could it be that Tang Xiaoyu was also from the other world? He did have the bipolar mirror, but he could not open the passage to the other world. There must be some conditions. The bipolar mirror can open the door to the other world. If you have this thing, you can directly leave the outer region. Tang Xiaoyu said quickly. Right, it can be used together with the Star Atlas lock. As he spoke, Tang Xiaoyu slapped his forehead. I almost forgot. The Star Atlas lock can not only store other people, but also the owner. Because the Star Atlas lock itself is a spatial Dharma artifact that can store life. Tang Xiaoyu's words could be considered to have enlightened Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu also understood what he meant. But the current situation was far from that serious. Don't worry. Kong Shinmu patted Tang Xiaoyu's shoulder. I just came to ask something. I will leave the Heaven Origin Palace very soon. Brother Jiang, you are wrong. Tang Xiaoyu's expression was solemn. The United Alliance has been targeting the Heaven Origin Palace for a long time. This time, they just found a so-called excuse. The four sects are not as harmonious as the rumors say. They are all competitors. There is no real friendship. Tang Xiaoyu hesitated for a moment. Then, as if he had made up his mind, he slowly said. If necessary, you can find the Tang village's martial artist, Old Shen. Tang village's Old Shen? Compared to the Tang village's Old Shen, Kong Shinmu was more concerned about what Tang Xiaoyu had said. In fact, not only the sects, but even the cultivators were also in a relationship of competition. Since it was a relationship of competition, then there would be no real friendship. But just now, Tang Xiaoyu had clearly mentioned the Tang village's Old Shen. He would remember this friendship. This is a keepsake. Tang Xiaoyu searched in his pocket and took out a green crescent jade pendant. The jade pendant was engraved with the word Tang. Kong Shinmu did not refuse and took the jade pendant. The two of you. At this moment, a young man in a gray robe walked over quickly. He restrained his aura and strode in front of Kong Shinmu and Tang Xiaoyu. This person was a disciple of the Heaven Origin Palace, Lian Zhu, who was related to Lian Yi by blood. Lian Zhu naturally saw Tang Xiaoyu and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Tang Xiaoyu, how dare you appear here? Why wouldn't I dare? Tang Xiaoyu curled his lips. What are you doing here? I am under the orders of the Palace Master to invite you to the Heaven Origin Palace. Lian Zhu's eyes turned and fell on Kong Shinmu. He said politely. Young Master, the Palace Master invites you. Chapter 57-61. Yes. Kong Shinmu didn't refuse. Although he felt that Wan Zong's words were strange, he couldn't help but remember what Wan Zong had said. He said that the master of the Tianyuan Palace was best friends with Feng. Of course, there was also the matter of the ancestors of the dragon gods. Tang Xiaoyu also returned to the Tianyuan Palace. In terms of strength, Lian Zhu and Tang Xiaoyu were on par. Whether they could catch Tang Xiaoyu depended on their attainments in the nature-essence superposition technique. The outside world knew that Tang Xiaoyu was ignorant and incompetent. His comprehension of his sect's manifestation origin stacking technique was a complete mess. Only those who had fought with Tang Xiaoyu knew that his nature-essence superposition technique was very strong. Moreover, his manifestation origin stacking technique allowed him to adapt to the situation and deal with all kinds of situations calmly. It was not limited to a single spell technique. Now that Tang Xiaoyu had appeared in the Tianyuan Palace, the disciples were no longer surprised. Lian Yi had gone out and hadn't returned yet. Lian Zhu had temporarily replaced Lian Yi's position and was in charge of some trivial matters in the Tianyuan Palace. Currently, there were people from other sects visiting the Tianyuan Palace. They were from the Shaoyun sect, the Qing sect, and the Wuji Pavilion. It was because of the crack that had suddenly appeared in the world boundary. The elders speculated that it was because the secret realm had suddenly collapsed, causing a crack to appear in the southern part of the outer region. The crack was relatively close to the cities under the jurisdiction of the Tianyuan Palace and Shangzhou City. Thus, Shangzhou City had also sent people over. It had happened so suddenly that the elders had arranged a meeting. The crack was still small, not enough for one person to pass through. But the aura of the spatial storm from the crack was getting stronger and stronger. Moreover, it was clearly mixed with the aura of the other world. That included the aura of the other world. The other world's foundation was very terrifying. The outer region, even the Feng region, couldn't underestimate the other world. The first person to discover the crack was Elder Nangong Fengyu of the Wuji Pavilion. She had discovered it by chance on the way back to the Wuji Pavilion with Nangong Yi. The two of them temporarily cast a spell to seal the crack, but it was only a temporary seal. There were still spatial storms blowing out from it. Fortunately, the terrain was more remote, so no one would be sucked in. But this wasn't a long-term solution. The strength of the spatial storm was not something an ordinary supreme cultivator could withstand. In addition, that crack seemed to be expanding. Given time, it would sooner or later affect Upper Continent City, and even the entire Heavenly Origin Palace's subsidiary cities. In the end, it would affect the entire outer realm. Hence, Nangong Fengyu came to the Heavenly Yuan Palace to discuss how to resolve this matter. Tang Xiaoyu did not expect Heavenly Yuan Palace to be so lively. He directly asked Lian Zhu to bring Kong Xinmu to find the palace lord or arrange a place for him to stay. Tang Xiaoyu? How dare you come back? On the way, the three of them were stopped. They were from other sections. I am a disciple of Heavenly Yuan Palace. If I don't come here, where should I go? Tang Xiaoyu raised his eyebrows as he casually swept his gaze over the guests in front of him. Not far away, the great elders finished their discussion. As for the matter of the crack in the boundary of the world, they were prepared to work together to repair it. The general of Shangzhou City had already contacted the city lord. It was time for the elders to return and prepare for the repairs. Kong Xinmu. From afar, Elder Nangong Fengyu of the Everlasting Pavilion saw Kong Xinmu and shouted coldly. Not long ago, he had received a summons. He originally planned to capture Kong Xinmu after the meeting, but he did not expect to see Kong Xinmu here. It was truly unexpected. Nangong Fengyu's figure flashed and appeared beside Kong Xinmu. Elder Nangong. Tang Xiaoyu shouted loudly. Not only did his shout not stop Nangong Fengyu, but he was also stopped by Nangong Fengyu's words. Who do you think you are? The dignified Elder Nangong of the Everlasting Pavilion is usually like this? Tang Xiaoyu was not afraid of Nangong Fengyu. Wasn't it just because he had the Nangong family behind him? As a hidden family, the Nangong family could not be bothered with these trivial matters. How I do is not up to you to point your finger at me. Nangong Fengyu said as she pointed at Tang Xiaoyu. Tang Xiaoyu, are you crazy? Lian Zhu was clear of Nangong Fengyu's strength. If this attack landed, Tang Xiaoyu would definitely be seriously injured. The crazy one is Nangong Fengyu, right? No wonder that crazy woman is so unreasonable. Even the elders in the family are like this. What kind of disciples can you expect from them? Tang Xiaoyu sneered and did not move at all. He was not afraid of Nangong Fengyu's attack. Elder Nangong, this junior was rude. Lian Zhu respectfully apologized to Nangong Fengyu. Nangong Fengyu retracted her hand this time. Wait for me to take care of that thief, then I will deal with you. Nangong Fengyu's gaze fell on Kang Xinmu once again. That pair of sinister eyes was filled with dense killing intent. It was as if she wanted to tear Kang Xinmu into pieces. Thus, Nangong Fengyu did not hold back when dealing with Kang Xinmu. She immediately released her 9th-level divine power. In an instant, a glass-like barrier suddenly spread out and gathered towards Kang Xinmu. Jiang Shenwu could clearly feel the suppression of a cultivation realm suddenly assaulting him. However, this suppression only lasted for a breath's time before it disappeared. Kang Xinmu looked up and saw a white-haired old man dressed in a white robe walking over with his hands behind his back. Elder Nangong. The moment the person spoke, all the suppression released by Nangong Fengyu was dispelled. Greetings, Palace Master. All the Heavenly Yuan Palace disciples bowed in unison. Kang Xinmu also cupped his fists and bowed. Tian Xingyi, do you know who this person is? Nangong Fengyu turned her head and looked at the Heavenly Yuan Palace Master. Her tone was filled with hostility. I heard you call him Kang Xinmu just now. That should be Kang Xinmu, right? Tian Xingyi smiled. That's right. This person's name is Kang Xinmu. Nangong Fengyu raised her eyebrows and said gloomily, he killed several elite disciples of my limitless pavilion and did not even let the pavilion master's daughter off. This person should be executed. Is that true? Tian Xingyi heard this and glanced at Kang Xinmu. At the same time, Kang Xinmu felt an extreme yang energy suddenly sweeping over. This was probably the energy of the Heavenly Yuan Palace Master, Tian Xingyi. Kang Xinmu restrained his aura so that he would not clash with this energy. Tian Xingyi also restrained his aura very quickly. The disciples who went to the sealed secret territory are all eyewitnesses. They can all prove that he killed countless disciples. Nangong Fengyu's face was extremely gloomy. The powerful divine energy that was released from her body was closing in on Kang Xinmu. So, you are targeting Kang Xinmu because of your family? Tian Xingyi stroked his beard and said. Chapter 57-62. Of course not. Tian Xingyi stroked his beard and smiled. Palace Master, please hand him over. Nangong Fengyu's eyes darkened. Not only were there people from Tianyuan Palace, but there were also guests from other sections. Most of them were here because of the abnormal crack that had appeared at the world boundary. They were also influential people from various sections. It was surprising that something like this had happened between Tianyuan Palace and Wuji Pavilion. Of course, they did not know the whole picture and did not comment. They just maintained an objective attitude from afar. Elder Nangong is right. Tian Xingyi nodded. But, suddenly, he changed the topic. This is Tianyuan Palace. Elder Nangong should know the rules of Tianyuan Palace, right? Nangong Fengyu did not want to listen to any reasoning at all. In his opinion, anyone who stopped him from capturing Kang Xinmu was declaring war on Wuji Pavilion. There had already been some friction with Tianyuan Palace because of the alliance. Now that Tian Xingyi had done this, it was very thought-provoking. I know the rules of Tianyuan Palace, but you know that this person is wanted by Wuji Pavilion. Can you give me an explanation? Nangong Fengyu was already circulating his supreme divine power as he spoke. It was as though he would start a fight if there was any disagreement. This was Nangong Fengyu's confidence in Wuji Pavilion. Once they started a war, Wuji Pavilion would not fear Tianyuan Palace at all. This brother is a guest of Tianyuan Palace and he is now in Tianyuan Palace. If you take him away from Tianyuan Palace, how will the world look at Tianyuan Palace? Tian Xingyi said unhurriedly. Then who would dare to come to Tianyuan Palace? Tian Xingyi's words made sense. All the guests of Tianyuan Palace agreed with Tian Xingyi's words. To think that you still know this. Nangong Fengyu sneered coldly. Tianyuan Palace knows that Kong Shinmu is wanted by Wuji Pavilion, but you still insist on protecting him. If this gets out, won't Tianyuan Palace become a place that deliberately protects criminals? Nangong Fengyu's gaze landed on Tang Xiaoyu after she finished speaking. As a wanted criminal of the Heavenly Yuan Palace, not only did Tang Xiaoyu appear to be in good spirits, but he was also safe and sound in the Heavenly Yuan Palace. Is this how your Heavenly Yuan Palace does things? Nangong Fengyu questioned in a clear voice. Elder Nangong, if you want to talk about your Wuji Pavilion, just say it. Why do you keep looking at me? Could it be that I'm a long-lost clansman of your Nangong family? Tang Xiaoyu looked at Nangong Fengyu innocently. If that's the case, then I'll have to trouble Elder Nangong to find a suitable time to pass on the power of the Nangong clan's bloodline. Impudent! Nangong Fengyu shouted coldly. With a wave of his sleeve, a white waterfall swept out and headed straight for Tang Xiaoyu. Elder Nangong, is this how you treat your Nangong family members? If this were to spread out, wouldn't it damage the reputation of your Nangong family? Tang Xiaoyu executed the myriad elephant origin superposition technique and easily dodged Nangong Fengyu's attack. When Tian Xingyi saw this, his murky eyes lit up. After not seeing him for a period of time, this kid's myriad elephant origin superposition technique had become even more exquisite. Kong Shinmu also broke out in cold sweat and was about to make a move. Tang Xiaoyu naturally saw through Kong Shinmu's thoughts. Under such circumstances, Kong Shinmu definitely couldn't make a move. Otherwise, he would only become a laughing stock for Nangong Fengyu. Our Nangong family doesn't have a clansman like you. Nangong Fengyu emphasized coldly. All the clansmen of the Nangong family have the surname Nangong. If I remember correctly, your name is Tang Xiaoyu. Elder Nangong actually remembers this junior's name. I'm really flattered. Tang Xiaoyu said with a mischievous smile. However, there's something this junior has to remind Elder Nangong. Elder Nangong is wrong when you said that all the clansmen of the Nangong family have the surname Nangong. After all, Gu Feng's surname is Gu. Nangong Fengyu's face darkened. Tang Xiaoyu. Tian Xingyi stopped Tang Xiaoyu. Tang Xiaoyu tactfully retreated to the side. Tian Xingyi, do you really want to protect Kong Shinmu? Nangong Fengyu's words were filled with the smell of gunpowder. She wasn't polite at all and directly called Tian Xingyi by his real name. Kong Shinmu is a guest of our Heavenly Yuan Palace. During his stay, we definitely won't hand him over to you. Tian Xingyi said firmly. Very well. Nangong Fengyu was so angry that she laughed. She flung her sleeves and strode out of Heavenly Yuan Palace. Someone, send Elder Nangong out. Tian Xingyi called out. No need. After Nangong Fengyu left, the guests from the other sects also bid farewell to Heavenly Yuan Palace. Tian Xingyi was about to bring Kong Shinmu to the Forbidden Grounds when he was stopped by Tang Xiaoyu. Palace Lord, you can't be muddle-headed. Do I look like that kind of person to you? Tian Xingyi raised his brows. Lian Yi, capture Tang Xiaoyu. Lian Yi had been waiting at the side for a long time. When he heard Tian Xingyi's order, he immediately came over and tied up Tang Xiaoyu. Palace Lord, I've said it many times. I really didn't mean to barge into the Forbidden Grounds. Moreover, there's nothing to take inside. When Tang Xiaoyu opened his mouth, the people from Heavenly Yuan Palace felt a sharp pain in their heads. He was really too talkative. In just a short while, he had already said a lot. Tian Xingyi was annoyed listening to him and couldn't help but frown. Only Lian Yi was expressionless. Eldest senior brother Lian Yi was probably the only person in the entire Heavenly Yuan Palace who could endure Tang Xiaoyu's nagging. Alright, there's no need to tie him up. Tian Xingyi waved his hand helplessly. Then, he ignored Tang Xiaoyu and let him be. Tian Xingyi brought Kong Xinmu into the forbidden grounds of Heavenly Yuan Palace. The moment he stepped into the forbidden grounds, Kong Xinmu felt a strange feeling coming from the qi meridians in his body. The most obvious feeling came from the engraving of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Ever since he absorbed the power from the explosion of Feng's secret realm, the engraving of the 7 devouring demon sealing art had completely transformed into 2 forms, yin and yang, which was the bipolar mirror. At this moment, the bipolar mirror opened automatically. The power in the qi meridians moved on its own, attacking the consciousness of his soul. The consciousness of his soul that had always been calm also started to churn. With the churning of the consciousness of his soul, Kong Xinmu felt that his soul and consciousness were gradually becoming stronger. What kind of power was in this forbidden ground? Kong Xinmu couldn't help but be curious. He had heard Tang Xiaoyu mention the ancestors of the dragon gods before. He didn't know if it was because of the ancestors' power that caused his power to react like this. But thinking about it, the abnormality in the qi meridians should correspond to the power of the ancestors. Then what about the engraving of the 7 devouring demon sealing art? Could there still be remnants of Feng's power here? Kong Xinmu, you are a member of the dragon gods, right? Chapter 57-63. Kong Xinmu hesitated as he looked at the misty passageway. This was his first official visit to the Heavenly Yuan Palace. How did he get brought to the forbidden area? Senior, I am a member of the Dragon God clan. My name is Kong Xinmu answered honestly. Please come in. Tian Xingyi smiled and gestured for Kong Xinmu to enter the passageway. As if he knew Kong Xinmu's concerns, Tian Xingyi smiled. Little friend, do I look like an unreasonable person to you? Kong Xinmu bowed. He knew this, but he was confused. He had just arrived at the Heavenly Yuan Palace. Why was he invited to the forbidden area? Big senior brother, just let me take a look around. Behind him, Tang Xiaoyu's resentful voice came. Immediately, Tang Xiaoyu's figure appeared. After a breath's time, Lian Yi's figure appeared. Tang Xiaoyu. How many times have I told you? You have to cultivate the 10,000 elephants origin folding technique. Don't skip levels. Lian Yi emphasized. Anyone who understood the manifestation origin superimposition technique would be able to tell at a glance how Tang Xiaoyu used the manifestation origin superimposition technique. This guy obviously did not cultivate according to the conventional method. This method allowed one to improve quickly, but it also had serious drawbacks. There was a high chance that it would backfire. Right now, his realm was still low, so he might not notice anything. When his cultivation was higher, he would know the drawbacks. Big senior brother, I understand. I will change next time. Tang Xiaoyu came to the entrance of the passageway. With just a glance, he knew the route. He told Kong Xinmu the route in detail. He also told Kong Xinmu where he could meet the ancestor of the Dragon God clan. Tian Xingyi and Lian Yi were dumbfounded by what they saw. Brother Jiang, don't worry and go in. If there is any danger, please call me. The palace master will not leave you in the lurch. Thank you. Kong Xinmu thanked him and stepped into the passageway. As soon as they entered, the gate of the Forbidden Land closed. Young Master Jiang, don't worry. If you are in danger in Heavenly Yuan Palace, it will definitely be because of Tang Xiaoyu. Kong Xinmu hadn't even taken a few steps when he heard Lian Yi's voice coming from behind him. He couldn't help but laugh. Eldest senior brother, I didn't do anything just now. What do you mean by that? Tang Xiaoyu's face twitched. After complaining about Lian Yi, Tang Xiaoyu's expression turned serious. Palace Master, eldest senior brother, what do you think about the Everlasting Pavilion and the Alliance? What else is there to consider? Do we even have time to think about it? Tian Xing-yi threw down these words and strode away. Lian Yi glanced at Tang Xiaoyu helplessly and followed Tian Xing-yi. Palace Master, can we win? This was what Tang Xiaoyu was most concerned about. The disparity in strength is too great. The outcome has been decided. Tian Xingyi let out a long sigh. In the forbidden area. After Kong Xinmu entered the passageway, he followed Tang Xiaoyu's instructions and came to a cave abode. A majestic statue was enshrined in the center of the cave abode. As soon as Kong Xinmu entered, he felt a kind of pressure from his bloodline. He knelt in front of the statue and bowed respectfully. As he bowed, he heard a deep voice. Kong Xinmu instinctively became alert and raised his head. An old man walked out from behind the statue. He was wearing a long robe and holding a bronze jade folding fan. To Kong Xinmu, the person who came was very unfamiliar. But the bronze jade folding fan in the person's hand was very familiar to Kong Xinmu. It was the magical artifact of an ancestor of the Dragon God clan. Junior Kong Xinmu greets ancestor. Kong Xinmu bowed respectfully. Kong Xinmu, right? The old man replied with a smile. I'm not your ancestor. Kong Xinmu was confused. According to Tang Xiaoyu, the person enshrined here was the ancestor of the Dragon God clan. Moreover, the bronze jade folding fan in the person's hand also proved his identity. If he was not an ancestor of the Dragon God clan, where did this bronze jade folding fan come from? I'm sorry, I took this folding fan without permission. The old man seemed to realize what Kong Xinmu cared about, so he said and then handed the bronze jade folding fan to Kong Xinmu. Kong Xinmu hurriedly stepped back. I dare not. I didn't know this folding fan was yours. Now I give it back to you. There's nothing to be afraid of. It was originally yours. The old man said with a smile. Seeing that Kong Xinmu still refused to take the fan, he put the fan in front of the statue. Kong Xinmu looked at the fan and then at the statue. This old man was indeed a little different from the statue. This was the forbidden area of the Tianyuan Palace. Anyone who could appear here must be an elder of the Tianyuan Palace. Kong Xinmu, you don't have to be so formal. The old man smiled kindly. He seemed to have thought of something and said, you're right. He seemed to think of something and said, in a sense, you should call me Martial Uncle. Martial Uncle? Kong Xinmu's first reaction was that this person was the junior of his master, Emperor Shi. However, he had basically seen all of his master's junior, but he had never seen this person. The old man paused and said, my name is Su Guang. Before the old man said his name, Kong Xinmu still thought that this must be the martial uncle that he had never met. Now that he said his name, Kong Xinmu was sure that he had never seen this martial uncle. What? Feng didn't tell you about me? Su Guang saw that Kong Xinmu's face was full of doubt, so he couldn't help but blame him. Feng. Kong Xinmu's heart suddenly froze. This senior Su Guang actually knew Feng? Su Guang saw Kong Xinmu's reaction and knew that he had guessed correctly. He couldn't help but feel a little dissatisfied. Feng gave his power of inheritance to this kid and instructed him to find him. In the end, he didn't even introduce himself to the other party. I'm sorry for my lack of manners. Kong Xinmu's words and actions were humble and courteous. It's not your fault. It's Feng's fault. Su Guang said faintly. You said that when he asked you to be his successor, he should at least tell you about his social circle, right? It shouldn't be so awkward for us to meet, right? Senior, Kong Xinmu didn't know what to say for a moment. From the first time he entered Feng's secret realm, Kong Xinmu had always thought that Feng no longer existed. Because he had already passed away, there was such a thing as the power of inheritance. Now it seemed that things didn't seem to be the case. Feng should still exist somewhere in the world. This senior who called himself Su Guang was the master of the Tianyuan Palace Lord, right? You don't have to be so polite. Su Guang had always been unceremonious. He turned and pointed to the bronze jade folding fan on the stage. I picked that fan up. Senior, call me Martial Uncle. Martial Uncle. Kong Shinmu changed the way he addressed him. But he still felt that something was strange. Chapter 57-64. If you need it, go ahead and get it. Su Guang generously stepped aside, making way for Kong Shinmu. I dare not. Kong Shinmu knew very well that this was the ritual implement of the dragon god's ancestor. How could he bear to take it? You're already here. What's there to be afraid of? Su Guang laughed when he heard this. Then, he pointed a finger in the air. Kong Shinmu's body uncontrollably walked in front of the statue, and the ancient bronze jade folding fan floated up. Kong Shinmu thought for a moment, then took the ancient bronze jade folding fan. A large amount of information surged out from it. It was about the ancestor of the dragon gods. The ancestor of the dragon gods worshipped by the heavenly Yuan Palace was usually called Jiangshu. Jiangshu had traveled outside thousands of years ago. He had been to many worlds, including the other world. He had spent the longest time in the other world. After returning from the other world, he came to the extraterritorial realm. He was accidentally involved in a major war in the extraterritorial realm. To the extraterritorial realm, the war had caused too many losses. Hundreds of powerful sects in the extraterritorial realm were involved. In the end, they did not survive and fell in the long river of history. Unfortunately, Jiangshu came to the extraterritorial realm just in time for the war. When he arrived, the war was basically over. The entire extraterritorial realm was in chaos. He happened to meet the palace master of the heavenly Yuan Palace, Tian Xingyi. Tian Xingyi, whom he had casually saved, was the disciple of Su Guang, whom he had met once in the other world. Later, Tian Xingyi worshipped Jiangshu. It could be said that without Jiangshu, it was uncertain whether the heavenly Yuan Palace could continue to exist. This ancient bronze jade folding fan recorded Jiangshu's life experiences. Kong Shinmu looked through it briefly. He did not know what the end of Jiangshu's ancestor was. Jiangshu's ancestor had left the ancient bronze folding fan in the heavenly Yuan Palace. If one day a member of the dragon gods came to the heavenly Yuan Palace, he would hand it over to the descendant of the dragon gods. Take it. It's what you deserve. Su Guang smiled and turned to sit on the stone table in front of Jiangshu's statue. Kong Shinmu accepted the bronze jade folding fan. There's nothing else here. You can go now. Su Guang paused for a moment, glanced at the environment, and added, that's right. Of course, if you want to stroll around, you can. In the forbidden area of the heavenly Yuan Palace, there are several kinds of natural forces with supreme divine power. You can see if you can comprehend them. If you can take them away. Su Guang's words made Kong Shinmu feel strange. This was a forbidden area of the Tianyuan Palace, and Su Guang was the master of the Tianyuan Palace's palace lord, Tian Xingyi. Did Tian Xingyi know that Su Guang was openly giving away his sect's supreme divine power, the power of nature? Of course, Kong Shinmu still wanted to try and comprehend the force of nature that existed in the Forbidden Land. Thank you, Senior. Kong Shinmu did not refuse and planned to give it a try. It was rare to have such an opportunity to comprehend the power of nature, so Kong Shinmu naturally would not miss it. Among the several kinds of supreme divine powers that Kong Shinmu had comprehended, only the supreme spirit flame had reached the 9th level. The other supreme divine powers, after experiencing several battles, had more or less improved. Kong Shinmu's cultivation system was affected by the seven devouring demon sealing mantra, and coupled with the mutation of the Supreme Spirit Flame, Kong Shinmu's Supreme Divine Power could only reach the 9th level, and could not improve further. As long as all the Supreme Divine Powers he comprehended reached the 9th level, the door to the realm of laws would open. Regarding this, Jiang Shenwu had seriously comprehended this before. The so-called comprehension of all the Supreme Divine Powers to the 9th level was perhaps just a kind of condition. The real breakthrough depended on the cultivation of the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra. Originally, the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra could only advance by absorbing the power of laws, but with the appearance of the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra, and the appearance of the bipolar mirror, the advancement of the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra seemed to be related to the cultivator's own supreme divine power. When many kinds of supreme divine powers reached the 9th level, the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra would advance faster. Kong Shinmu's cultivation system itself was a diversified cultivation system. Only by cultivating diversified supreme divine powers could he improve further. Moreover, the current devouring power, combined with the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra, could refine the supreme divine power's force of nature. It could refine part of the supreme divine power's force of nature and transform it into the supreme divine power that one needed. Of course, Kong Shinmu was aware of the limitations of his own cultivation. So far, he only had 2 fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra, and it was not the complete version. In the future, he would have to find the other fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra. Go. Su Guang smiled and watched Kong Shinmu's figure disappear into the swirling fog. Then, he turned back and cupped his fists at the statue. He had been waiting here for the sake of giving the ancient bronze jade folding fan to the descendant of the dragon gods. Now, the task was completed. Su Guang stepped forward and walked around this place. Suddenly, he sensed a certain aura and reached out to touch the air. The aura in the air had a familiar feeling. A name suddenly appeared in Su Guang's mind. Feng. It was Feng's power of inheritance. Su Guang's eyes narrowed as he glanced in the direction Kong Shinmu had left. Although he was a descendant of the dragon gods and his aptitude seemed to be good, he was not very clear about his cultivation talent. Did Feng just give her power of inheritance to this descendant of the dragon gods? Kong Shinmu left the place where the ancestors were enshrined and walked along a small path. After walking for a while, he saw several forks in the road. Kong Shinmu wanted to see what was going on at the other end of the road, but the surrounding fog was so thick that he could not see at all. Furthermore, this fog also obstructed one's soul consciousness, making it impossible for one's soul consciousness to check their surroundings as they wished. Kong Shinmu looked again, chose the path on the far right, and walked up it. It did not take long for him to reach the end of the road. In front of him was an endless lake. The surface of the lake was calm and there were no ripples. The lake water was so clear that he could see the scene under it. There was a palace standing in the water. Seeing the palace under the water, Kong Shinmu hesitated. After all, this was the forbidden area of the Tianyuan Palace. As an outsider, Tian Xingyi had given enough face to ancestor Jiang Shu by letting him in. Now, because of Senior Su Guang's words, he really did not care about the rules of the Tianyuan Palace. Kong Shinmu hesitated for a moment, then turned and walked away. Once again, he set foot on the path back. When he walked on this path for the second time, Kong Shinmu found that the fog was not ordinary fog, but a kind of supreme divine power of nature. Chapter 57-65. Kong Shinmu was rather familiar with the power of the supreme mist, but he did not expect that the power of nature gathered here was somewhat different from the power of the supreme mist that he had come into contact with previously. This power of nature was not as aggressive as the power of the supreme mist that he had come into contact with previously. On the contrary, the power of nature in front of him felt very gentle. If he walked past it, or even used his soul consciousness and other powers to examine it, it would not have any offensive power. As he was thinking this, Kang Xinmu suddenly sensed something strange in his soul consciousness. The soul consciousness that returned was mixed with an unfamiliar power that invaded his soul consciousness and sea of consciousness. It was the power of nature of the supreme mist that floated here. Although the power of nature of the supreme mist felt very gentle, it was not gentle at all after invading his soul consciousness. Instead, it wreaked havoc. When Kang Xinmu sensed the abnormality in his soul consciousness, the power of nature of the supreme mist had already invaded his soul consciousness. It surged wantonly and stirred up the sea of consciousness that had always been calm. Jiang Xinwu's soul consciousness and sea of consciousness began to churn. To him, it was as if someone was strangling his soul consciousness, causing him to feel uneasy. However, the churning in his soul consciousness quickly calmed down. More than a year ago, Kang Xinmu had devoured the power of the supreme holy ice domain when the Dharma artifact that Ling Changhong's generals had refined perished in the ancient desolate city. All this while, Kang Xinmu had not had the opportunity to comprehend the power of the supreme holy ice domain that corresponded to the power of the supreme holy ice domain. Or rather, he had not encountered the power of the supreme holy ice domain at all. Ever since he had devoured the power of the supreme holy ice domain, this power had always existed in his soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness. After a long time, the power of the supreme holy ice domain had basically integrated into his soul consciousness. If there were any other impure energies invading his sea of consciousness, the supreme sacred ice domain would definitely expel them. This time was no exception. As soon as the supreme mist's nature power wreaked havoc in his sea of consciousness, the supreme holy ice domain quickly surrounded this power. However, the supreme sacred ice domain's power did not directly expel this power. Instead, it condensed. Kang Xinmu happened to devour this energy. With the help of the supreme sacred ice domain, the power of nature that invaded his body became his own supreme divine power after devouring it. This meant that Kang Xinmu could directly use the power of the supreme mist. He roughly sensed that the supreme mist's power he had just devoured was only one level. Kang Xinmu looked at the supreme mist's force of nature and did not hesitate to release his devouring power to devour it. He did not intend to devour all the power of nature in the supreme mist's force of nature. He intended to stop as soon as he reached the fifth level of the supreme mist's force of nature. What Jiang Xinwu didn't expect was that after he unleashed his devouring power, not only did he devour all the power of nature of the supreme fog that had gathered in the passageway, but he also devoured the power of nature of the supreme divine power that was drifting in the surroundings. The power of nature of supreme divine power that he devoured was very heterogeneous. On the surface, there was a total of 3 types of supreme divine power. Among them, there was the power of nature from the power of supreme mysterious iron, the power of nature from the power of supreme wind, and the power of supreme sacred land. Compared to the previous 2 types of supreme divine power, the power of supreme sacred land's power of nature was much less concentrated. Even so, after devouring the power of supreme sacred land's power of nature, his power of supreme sacred land's power was enhanced. The power of supreme sacred land barely reached the 6th level. Following closely behind was the supreme divine power and the supreme dark iron power, which had reached the 7th level. There was also the power of supreme wind's force of nature. Kang Xinmu had previously fought with a supreme wind's force of supreme wind, but he did not devour the supreme wind's force of supreme wind. Now that he had devoured a large amount of power of supreme wind's force of nature, he could only reach the 3rd level after refining it. After gathering the power of supreme divine power, Kang Xinmu retracted his devouring power. If he did not retract his devouring power quickly, it would continue to devour the power of nature of supreme divine power. This was the heavenly Yuan Palace's forbidden area. Senior Su Guang allowed him to come in and refine the power of supreme divine power, which was already giving face to ancestor Jiang Shu. He had to be content. Kong Shinmu retracted his devouring power and left the place. He walked according to the way he came, but he did not return to the statue of ancestor Jiang Shu. He did not even see Senior Su Guang. There was no fog on the road under his feet. On the contrary, his vision was very clear, and he could see far away. Because of this, Kong Shinmu felt that there was something fishy about this matter. Although he had walked a long distance when he came here, the journey was not as long as it was now. Looking at his surroundings, it was brighter than before, but the aura that permeated the air was the same as before. Based on the aura in the surroundings, Kong Shinmu felt that he did not go the wrong way. However, he could not see the end of the road under his feet, which made him a little confused. Could it be some kind of boundary? Or some secret realm? No matter what, Heavenly Yuan Palace was a famous sect in the outer domain. Moreover, the sect had a rich history. It was completely normal for there to be boundary or secret realms in the forbidden area. After Su Guang instructed Kong Shinmu to refine the power of supreme divine power, he left the place where Jiang Shu's statue was. When he appeared again, he was at the entrance of the forbidden area. With Palace Master Tian Xingyi in the lead, Tang Xiaoyu and the other disciples followed closely behind, waiting there. Seeing Su Guang appear, Tian Xingyi immediately went forward. Master. Tian Xingyi did not expect to see his master today, and was a little surprised. Greetings, Grand Master. Tang Xiaoyu and the others respectfully bowed. Su Guang had arrived. Tang Xiaoyu was well behaved, respectfully standing to the side, not daring to raise his head. Seeing this scene, Lian Yi felt helpless. In the entire Heavenly Yuan Palace, the only person who could suppress Tang Xiaoyu was the Palace Master's master, Senior Su Guang. With so many people, Su Guang found Tang Xiaoyu in the crowd with his head lowered, and strode towards Tang Xiaoyu. Hearing the footsteps getting closer and closer, Tang Xiaoyu's heart was filled with bitterness. Su Guang had not been in Heavenly Yuan Palace for hundreds of years. Why did he return today? If he knew that Senior Su was here, he definitely would not have come to the forbidden area. Tang Xiaoyu, find a time to return home. Su Guang said the moment he came over. Why? Tang Xiaoyu asked, puzzled. Do you want to stay in Heavenly Yuan Palace? Su Guang paused, then asked in a low voice. Chapter 57-66. Is that true? Su Guang asked Tang Xiaoyu solemnly. Of course. Tang Xiaoyu nodded affirmatively. He added, of course, just don't make me the soul of Tianyuan Palace. As he finished speaking, he shot a glance at Lian Yi, using his eyes to warn him not to act rashly. Lian Yi was helpless about this. He was only following orders. Tang Xiaoyu would have been caught long ago if he had not gone easy on him. Since that's the case, why don't you go home immediately? Su Guang said quickly. Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong and looked at Lian Yi. Lian Yi, I'll have to trouble you to send Tang Xiaoyu home. Yes, Grand Master. Lian Yi accepted the order respectfully. Only Tang Xiaoyu had not processed the situation. He looked at Lian Yi and then at Su Guang, feeling very confused. Grand Master, why did you expel me from Tianyuan Palace as soon as you returned? Everything has to be reasonable, right? If you don't give me a reasonable explanation, I won't leave even if I act unreasonable and shamelessly. This happened too suddenly. Tang Xiaoyu could not accept it at all. Moreover, if he left, what would happen to Kong Shinmu? Tianyuan Palace was the only place Kong Shinmu could rely on. If he left Tianyuan Palace, Kong Shinmu would be in endless trouble. Do you think I'm that kind of unreasonable person at my age? Su Guang raised an eyebrow and glanced at Lien Yi. Set off as soon as possible. Yes, Grand Master. Lien Yi took the order and forcefully left Tianyuan Palace with Tang Xiaoyu. Tang Xiaoyu had a high level of attainment in the manifestation essence superimposition technique, but he had been under Lien Yi's supervision since the beginning. Even though he had made many improvements to the manifestation essence superimposition technique, Lien Yi had long figured out Tang Xiaoyu's routine and could easily find where Tang Xiaoyu's manifestation essence superimposition technique was. Only then did Tang Xiaoyu realize that he could not escape Lien Yi's grasp once Lien Yi got serious. Eldest senior brother, why didn't you just take me away? Tang Xiaoyu gave up jumping around and obediently followed Lien Yi. Because Palace Master only told me to follow you, he didn't say anything about capturing you. He said that you would come back sooner or later. Lien Yi said honestly. Eldest senior brother, you guys, Tang Xiaoyu was momentarily speechless. Tang Xiaoyu's home was in Tang village. In other words, when Tian Xingyi first met Tang Xiaoyu, it was in Tang village. At that time, Tang Xiaoyu had gotten into some kind of trouble and was being hunted down. Tian Xing had conveniently helped Tang Xiaoyu. In the end, for some unknown reason, he brought Tang Xiaoyu to the Heavenly Origin Palace. The Tang village was located in the north of the Nightmare region, which was relatively remote. Later on, when Tang Xiaoyu went out to train, he also went to the Dun realm, but he didn't go home. In his words, home was too far away, and he might not be able to find the way. This time, Tang Xiaoyu was personally driven out of the sect by Su Guang. Being chased out of Heaven Origin Palace was one thing, but Tang Xiaoyu would definitely not return home. In order to supervise his return home, Su Guang had no choice but to send out his right-hand man, Lien Yi. Eldest senior brother, why did Su Guang, under Lien Yi's friendly gaze, Tang Xiaoyu reluctantly added a sentence. Must senior chase me away? He hasn't returned to the Heavenly Origin Palace for a long time. It's not right to chase me away now that he's back. Do you know about the crack at the boundary of the world? Lien Yi asked after a moment of thought. I do. The crack doesn't just affect the Heavenly Origin Palace, but the entire outer realm. There's no need to worry too much about it. Tang Xiaoyu pursed his lips and said. I knew you would think that. Lien Yi glanced at Tang Xiaoyu, then grabbed him and sped up. Heavenly Origin Palace. Su Guang had sent Tang Xiaoyu back to Tang village because he had sensed the crack at the boundary of the world. Tang village, as its name suggested, was an ordinary village. However, the people living in the village were all top-notch almighties. Especially the Tang village chief, who was an expert of laws. The appearance of the crack at the boundary of the world seemed to affect the entire outer realm, but in fact, the Heavenly Origin Palace was the most affected. Coupled with the Allied Alliance's pincer attack, the Heavenly Origin Palace might be destroyed. The only one who could help the Heavenly Origin Palace was the expert of laws in Tang village. Su Guang knew about this. Once Tian Xingyi knew, Lien Yi quickly understood as well. Even the other disciples realized the severity of the crack at the boundary of the world. Only Tang Xiaoyu still didn't know anything. I never thought that one day, the survival of the Heavenly Origin Palace would fall on Tang Xiaoyu's shoulders. Tian Xingyi stroked his beard, his tone a little strange. This kid's talent is not bad, but I feel like he's not serious at all, Su Guang said. However, I don't know if Tang Xiaoyu's luck is good, but he actually brought back a descendant of the dragon gods. Tian Xingyi glanced in the direction of the Forbidden Land. The strength of Kong Xinmu's talent had already exceeded his expectations. This kid is about the same as Jiang Shu. Su Guang had already seen Kong Xinmu's ability, and his evaluation was very pertinent. He's also more handsome than Jiang Shu. Master, if Jiang Shu hears what you said, I believe he won't let you off. Tian Xingyi's expression was a little strange. Su Guang glanced outside the Heavenly Origin Palace, where the crack at the boundary of the world was. The people from the United Alliance have already arrived at Sun City. Suddenly, Su Guang said. Master, please stay here and protect Kong Xinmu. I'll go to Sun City, Tian Xingyi said, knowing that this matter could not be neglected. From the looks of it, the United Alliance obviously wants to get rid of the Heavenly Origin Palace. No matter what, don't leave the Heavenly Origin Palace. Su Guang understood the thoughts of the people from the United Alliance too well. They had long had ideas about the Heavenly Origin Palace, and this mission was just to express their thoughts. Su Guang's figure moved, and he left the Heavenly Origin Palace. A voice immediately sounded in Tian Xingyi's ears, Kong Xinmu is the inheritor of the power that my friend has bestowed upon him. You must ensure his safety. After Tian Xingyi received the order, he went to the exit of the Forbidden Land. In the Forbidden Land, Kong Xinmu came to an unfamiliar place. It was the supreme territory power that ancestor Jiang Shu had left behind. Based on what Kong Xinmu had sensed, he did not know the attribute of the supreme territory power, and could only judge that it was a type of supreme territory power. Moreover, he had already unknowingly entered the range of the supreme territory power. The deeper he went into the range of the supreme territory, the more he could feel the existence of the supreme territory power. However, he still could not tell what kind of supreme territory power it was. As he continued to move forward, he felt that his supreme territory power was moving strangely, and it gradually started to circulate. This mysterious supreme territory power resonated with the supreme territory power that Kong Xinmu currently possessed. What kind of supreme territory power was this? Or was this a type of supreme territory power that had no attribute? Chapter 57-67. Kong Xinmu sensed the surrounding supreme territory's power again and confirmed that there were no attributes. He tried to release one of the supreme divine powers, the power of supreme mysterious iron. He had mastered the power of supreme mysterious iron for some time, but he had not comprehended the corresponding supreme territory's power of supreme mysterious iron. The power of supreme mysterious iron spread around Kong Xinmu's body and gradually seeped into the surrounding supreme territory. What happened next caused Jiang Shenwu to be stupefied. Originally, he had not comprehended the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron. However, at this moment, when he unfolded this mysterious unknown territory, he actually unfolded the power of supreme mysterious iron. Moreover, Kong Xinmu could control the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron that suddenly unfolded. As Kong Xinmu's thoughts changed continuously, the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron kept changing. To confirm his guess, Kong Xinmu retracted the power of supreme mysterious iron. The moment he retracted the power of supreme mysterious iron, the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron was also retracted. Kong Xinmu could clearly feel the changes that happened to his power of supreme mysterious iron. After releasing the power of supreme mysterious iron, his power of supreme mysterious iron had unfolded the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron. Then, he released the power of Holy Land. This was a type of holy attribute supreme divine power. Ever since he had devoured it, it had maintained its original level. It was only recently that he had made some progress. Moreover, he could clearly feel that the cultivation of the power of supreme sacred land was much more difficult than ordinary supreme divine power. With such a high difficulty level of supreme divine power, the corresponding power of supreme territory's difficulty would definitely be higher. To Kong Xinmu, although he had not completely comprehended the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme territory, there were some signs. To be able to quickly comprehend the power of Supreme Mysterious Iron's power of Supreme Mysterious Iron's power of Supreme Divine Power was considered reasonable. The power of Supreme Holy Land was different. This was a type of Supreme God power that Kang Shinmu had not mastered. He would not even be able to use the power of the Supreme Sacred Land to unleash supreme martial skills, let alone comprehend the corresponding supreme power of the domain. The moment Kang Shinmu released the Supreme Sacred Land's power, the Supreme Sacred Land's power flew over and spread out in this attributeless domain. Then, Kang Shinmu clearly felt something extra in his mind. Information about domain power was gradually produced. This feeling was the domain power of the Supreme Holy Land. Kang Shinmu condensed the power of the Supreme Holy Earth's domain power, controlled the power of the Supreme Holy Earth, and successfully condensed the corresponding supreme martial skill of the Supreme Holy Earth. At this point, Kang Shinmu also understood. The attributeless domain power here could be combined with any supreme divine power, thereby helping the supreme divine power comprehend the corresponding supreme territory's power of supreme divine power as soon as possible. He did not expect Tianyuan Palace to have such a magical domain power. It was indeed a large sect with a strong foundation. After discovering that he had entered a domain world, Kang Shinmu used his soul consciousness to size up the scope of this domain world. Even though his soul consciousness was very strong and covered a wide range, he still could not detect the boundary of this domain world. Perhaps it had something to do with the domain world's restrictions on the soul consciousness, which hindered the extension of the soul consciousness. In the domain world, Kang Shinmu had already successfully mastered the power of domain of two supreme divine powers with the help of the power of domain here. He could clearly sense that the domain power of the space he was in had become much weaker. In other words, after comprehending the corresponding supreme territory's power of supreme divine power, the supreme territory's power of supreme territory in this attributeless supreme domain world was relatively weaker. Kang Shinmu specially controlled the Supreme Divine Flame and the Supreme Soul Power to release other Supreme Divine Powers one after another. Not long after, all of them comprehended the Supreme Territory's power. The Supreme Divine Flame was the first Supreme Divine Power that Kang Shinmu cultivated to the 9th realm, and there were some changes along the way. As the power of the Supreme Divine Fire mutated, the power of the Supreme Divine Fire domain also changed. In short, it was a supreme divine power with supreme territory's power, so there was no need to continue to comprehend it. In that case, it was the supreme soul power's turn next. Originally, Kang Shinmu's understanding of the supreme soul power was a spiritual type supreme divine power that was related to the soul consciousness. It would definitely be very difficult to comprehend the corresponding supreme territory's power. It was not until later that Kang Shinmu met Wanzong, a mysterious expert. In the sealed secret realm, Kang Shinmu met Wanzong in the ancient desolate ancient city, and in a period of experience after that, he also met Wanzong by chance. Kang Shinmu had never dared to underestimate Wanzong's strength. The two of them had noticed each other, but there had never been a collision of power. After the self-sealed secret realm collapsed, Kang Shinmu fell into the foreign realm and met Wanzong again. From that moment on, Kang Shinmu realized how terrifying Wanzong's strength was. The gap between his and Wanzong's cultivation was not just a gap in realm, but a gap in all aspects. At the critical moment, it was the supreme soul power that played a role. Kang Shinmu's understanding of the supreme soul power began to change. It could repel Wanzong's power. It wasn't just the pure power of the soul. However, Kang Shinmu did not have a clear understanding of what this power was. After thinking for a moment, Kang Shinmu released the Supreme Soul Power. After that battle, the appearance of the Supreme Soul Power had also changed to a certain extent and turned red. The Crimson Supreme Soul Power was extremely eye-catching in the invisible domain world. With Kang Shinmu as the center, the Supreme Soul Power spread out in all directions. Kang Shinmu carefully sensed the Supreme Soul Power, only to notice that the red power of the soul circled around the domain world and then returned. After restraining the Supreme Soul Power, Kang Shinmu did not sense any signs of the Supreme Soul Power producing domain world. This was strange. Other Supreme Divine Powers were fine, but why didn't it work when it came to the Supreme Soul Power? With this thought in mind, Kang Shinmu released the Supreme Divine Flame that had reached the 9th level. The moment the 9th level Supreme Divine Flame was released, Kang Shinmu clearly felt the domain world churning. The Supreme Divine Flame itself had already released the Supreme Domain Power. At this time, when it entered the domain world, it seemed to form a resonance with it, and a corresponding Supreme Domain Power was released. Chapter 57-68. As time passed, the domain power of the Supreme Divine Flame had completely occupied the domain world there. At the same time, Kang Shinmu also felt the scope of the entire domain world. It was no exaggeration to say that the domain world was like a brand new world that was above this place. However, there was only domain power in this brand new world. As the Supreme Divine Flame's domain power devoured the power in the domain world, Kang Shinmu felt that his domain power had reached a critical point. Looking at its saturated state, it seemed like it was about to break through. Initially, Kang Shinmu's understanding of the Supreme Domain Power was very limited, and he only regarded it as the corresponding domain power of the Supreme Divine Power. If the Supreme Divine Power broke through, the corresponding domain power of the Supreme Divine Power would also break through. However, it now seemed that the breakthrough point of the Supreme Domain Power did not seem to be gentle with the Supreme Divine Power. The Supreme Domain Power was more inclined to a new kind of power, and had different considerations from the realm of the Supreme Divine Power. What Kang Shinmu was facing at this moment was the breakthrough of the Supreme Divine Flame's domain power. He simply sat on the ground, and devoted himself to the breakthrough of the Supreme Divine Flame's domain power. Feeling the continuous changes of the Supreme Divine Flame's domain power, Kang Shinmu felt the world that existed in his own domain power. Kang Shinmu had a new understanding of the Supreme Divine Power and the domain power of the Supreme Divine Power. Supreme Divine Power was an existence of absolute power, and the corresponding Supreme Domain Power could be understood as a realm of power. This realm was more abstract to understand, so most people used the term domain as a general term. As the Supreme Divine Flame's domain power continued to devour the domain power in this domain world, the Supreme Domain Power corresponding to the Supreme Divine Flame was breaking through and becoming more inclined to domain power. Hence, Kang Shinmu speculated that this was not the case for the Supreme Divine Flame's domain power. After reaching a certain realm, the Supreme Domain Power corresponding to the other Supreme Divine Powers would lean more towards the power of domain. On the surface, the only difference between these two forms of address was the name. However, there was a world of difference in their essence. Supreme Territory Power meant that this power had a corresponding Supreme Divine Power, and it was closely related to Supreme Divine Power. Domain Power was a completely new kind of power. It could even be released independently of Supreme Divine Power. Moreover, when one's domain power reached a certain level, it would become a new world. The world formed by domain power was related to the secret realms that appeared in various places. Of those so-called secret realms, apart from a few that were naturally formed worlds in space, most of the secret realms were man-made. Here, Seal had to be mentioned. The reason why it was called Feng's mystic realm was because this mystic realm was also created by Feng. At this moment, Jiang Shenwu's Supreme Divine Spiritual Flame and its corresponding Supreme Domain Power were undergoing such a transformation. Once the transformation was complete, it would become a brand new domain power. This process lasted for 2 days. In the past 2 days, Kang Shinmu's Supreme Domain Power had been devouring the domain power in the domain world. Hard work paid off, and Kang Shinmu's domain power had completed its transformation. After feeling the brand new domain power, Kang Shinmu clearly sensed that as long as he willed it, this power would be released at will. Unlike the previous supreme domain power that required mastery of supreme divine power, the current domain power could be released on its own. In short, the current domain power was a brand new power that was different from supreme divine power. However, the domain power was transformed from the domain power of supreme divine power, after all, and its essence was also related to supreme divine power. What Kong Shinmu released just now was the supreme divine flame supreme divine domain. In that case, the domain power that he transformed at this time was the divine domain. The divine domain, as its name suggested, was a kind of domain power of flames. Kong Shinmu just tried to release it, and the domain world he was in was occupied by a sense of heat. "Kid, you're really not polite at all." Suddenly, a voice rang out from behind. Kong Shinmu's heart suddenly froze. "Senior is here, and I actually didn't notice it at all." As soon as he turned around, he saw Su Guang hurriedly walking over with his hands behind his back. "Senior." Kong Shinmu greeted him humbly. "Yes, Uncle Master." Su Guang frowned and emphasized impatiently. "If you weren't my disciple nephew, I wouldn't have bothered to talk to you." "Yes, Uncle Master." Kong Shinmu still changed the way he addressed Lin Li. Of course, the biggest question in his mind now was still the way he addressed Lin Li. Although he had gone to Feng's mystic realm and gained a lot, and his cultivation realm had also broken through, he had never seen Feng from the beginning to the end. However, from the beginning to the end, he had not even seen Feng. He had not even gone through the ceremony of becoming Feng's disciple. He just felt that something was off. He acknowledged Feng as his master, but he didn't know if Feng would acknowledge him as his disciple. "Thank you, Uncle Master." But then again, Su Guang guiding him to this domain world was a kind of recognition for him. "You don't have to thank me. I just promised Jiang Shu that I would give this to the descendants of the dragon gods." Su Guang smiled when he heard this. Kong Shinmu was stunned for a while, but at the same time, he felt very lucky. "That's right. Jiang Shu didn't specifically say that he would give it to you. He only said that it was a descendant of the dragon gods." Su Guang smiled playfully. "Are you very disappointed?" "I dare not." Kong Shinmu was still very self-aware. It was already a great opportunity for ancestor Jiang Shu to leave this domain world. Now that he had encountered it, he could only say that he was lucky. He didn't dare to have any complaints. The divine domain that Kong Shinmu condensed had also exhausted the domain power in this domain world. The domain world disappeared, revealing its original appearance. Only then did Kong Shinmu realize that he was still on the passage out of the forbidden area. "Why? Are you still not satisfied?" Seeing that Kong Shinmu was still standing still, Su Guang raised his eyebrows. He said, "I'm satisfied." Kong Shinmu responded bitterly, then strode to catch up with Su Guang. "By the way, Uncle Master, do you know where my ancestor is now?" When passing by the statue of ancestor Jiang Shu again, Kong Shinmu pondered and asked. He had a vague feeling that ancestor Jiang Shu should be traveling somewhere. "I don't know. Maybe he's dead." Su Guang hesitated for a long time before saying. He didn't seem to want to talk about this topic. After a few words, he urged Kong Shinmu to leave the forbidden area. At the exit of the forbidden area, Tian Xingyi had been waiting for a long time. Junior Kong Shinmu greets the palace master. Kong Shinmu was very grateful to Tian Xingyi. He was the one who gave him the opportunity to enter the forbidden area. He also had a good impression of the entire Tianyuan palace. The overall atmosphere was very good. "That's not necessary." Tian Xingyi smiled when he heard this. Chapter 57-69. Kong Shinmu could not help but have a strange expression. He almost forgot that Senior Su Guang was Tian Xingyi's master, and Feng was his master. In that case, Tian Xingyi was indeed his senior brother. Let's talk about it later. Things are urgent now. Let's hurry up and leave. Su Guang urged. 2 days ago, Kang Xinmu entered the forbidden area of Tianyuan Palace, and then entered the domain world. He knew nothing about what happened in the outside world. In just 2 days, Tianyuan Palace was taken out of the 4 major sects by the Wuji Pavilion. Not only that, the Wuji Pavilion officially declared war on Tianyuan Palace. The branch of the United Alliance in the outer region also issued an order. Although they did not explicitly say that they were going to attack Tianyuan Palace, they had already attacked the disciples of Tianyuan Palace. In 2 days' time, all the people or forces related to the Heavenly Yuan Palace in the entire outer domain were suppressed by the United Alliance. The Wuji Pavilion had already sent 3 teams to be stationed at the gate of Yang City. The only city that was related to Tianyuan Palace was Yang City. All the disciples of Tianyuan Palace were basically gathered in Yang City to face the enemy together with the soldiers there. The terrible news came at noon that Yang City's General Duan Tian was seriously injured in order to defend against Nangong Fengyu's attack. In order to protect Yang City, General Duan Tian used all his strength to maintain the city protection formation of Yang City, and temporarily stopped the team from Wuji Pavilion from entering the palace. Duan Tian knew that only by protecting Yang City could he protect Tianyuan Palace. For that, Duan Tian paid the price and used up all his vitality. Even so, the city protection formation of Yang City might not be able to hold on for long. On the way, Kang Xinmu fell into deep thought. If he had not come to Tianyuan Palace when he came to the outer region, he might not have cared about this matter. However, not only did he go to Tianyuan Palace, but he also went to the forbidden area of Tianyuan Palace. It was reasonable for him to help Tianyuan Palace. Moreover, Tian Xingyi, the palace master of Tianyuan Palace, was his senior brother. How could he abandon his senior brother at such a time? However, what puzzled Kang Xinmu was that the place they arrived at after descending the mountain was not Yang City, but an unfamiliar jungle. Follow your senses and move forward. With your ability, you should be able to find the teleportation array. When the time comes, just activate it. Su Guang glanced at the jungle ahead and said. Kang Xinmu finally understood. Martial uncle Su Guang and senior apprentice brother Tianqing wanted to send him out of the Heaven Essence Palace. Martial uncle, senior martial brother, I've just arrived here, it's not suitable for me to wander around alone. Kang Xinmu held it in for a long time before he finally said these words. Su Guang raised his eyebrows and glanced at Kang Xinmu meaningfully. The enemies we are facing this time are the Wuji Pavilion and the United Alliance. It's not child's play. Martial uncle, I have something to tell you. Kang Xinmu decided not to hide the grudges between him and the disciples of Everlasting Pavilion in the sealed secret realm. I know everything about you, Su Guang said indifferently. Kang Xinmu suddenly felt awkward and scratched his head. The reason why the Everlasting Pavilion came to find trouble with the Heaven Essence Palace was definitely because the Heaven Essence Palace had shielded him. He was well aware of this. Just don't run away, Su Guang said and turned back. Kang Xinmu hurriedly followed Su Guang's footsteps. With Su Guang in the lead, the 3 quickly returned to the Heaven Essence Palace. The battlefield was basically concentrated near Yang City. Tianqing quickly informed the disciples of the Heaven Essence Palace and rushed to Yang City. Outside the Yang City gate, led by Nangong Fengyu, the group of people set up a base here. Moreover, it was not far from the city gate. Apart from the people of the Everlasting Pavilion, there were also some members of the United Alliance. Of course, there were also many sects outside the domain that had basically completed their defection in the past 2 days. More than half of the sects had chosen to join the Everlasting Pavilion. It could be said that the Heaven Essence Palace would not be able to survive this crisis unless a miracle happened. And this miracle was the one in the Tang village. This was the reason why Su Guang asked Tang Xiaoyu to return home. As long as Tang Xiaoyu could invite that existence, the Heaven Essence Palace might have a chance to survive this crisis. In fact, Su Guang also thought highly of Kong Xinmu. Although Kong Xinmu was only a junior of the Dragon God clan, based on the fact that Kong Xinmu had been chosen as the successor by Feng, Kong Xinmu was a talent that could be molded. Feng was a very picky person, regardless of whether it was his life or his cultivation. If he did not like the cultivation technique, he would not cultivate it. Take the 7 devouring demon sealing art for example. In that era, the 7 devouring demon sealing art was a very terrifying existence. When Feng cultivated the 7 devouring demon sealing art, he only had an attitude of trying. In the end, he did not cultivate for too long before he more or less understood the situation of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. He did not want to continue cultivating it. The last place they met was the other world. It had been hundreds of years since they last met. As for where Feng was now, he did not know. "Master, there is something I would like to ask," Tian Xingyi said after thinking for a long time. "You want to ask about Feng, right? If I could contact Feng, would not have gone to find help." Su Guang twitched his mouth. Tian Xingyi laughed softly. Kong Xinmu opened his mouth, but the word "master" did not come out. The three of them arrived at Sun City and roughly understood the situation there. The situation was far more serious than Kong Xinmu had imagined. Moreover, when they entered Sun City, Kong Xinmu sensed that there was a problem with the city protecting formation. He had not seen how the city protecting formation looked like at its peak, but the city protecting formation now could be easily broken by anyone using the space rampart. There is a problem with the city protecting formation. Su Guang strengthened the city protecting formation, and the situation was much better than before. "Stay in Sun City and do not go anywhere. I will be back soon," Su Guang said solemnly. "Yes, Master." "Yes, Uncle Master." As soon as Su Guang finished speaking, his body turned into a cloud of green smoke and disappeared on the spot. Kong Xinmu felt the power of the realm from the green smoke. This must be Senior Su Guang's realm power. He could use space to achieve a kind of teleportation. "Palace Master, there are guests from Upper State City." Just then, someone came to report. Tian Xingyi was shocked. The city protecting formation around Sun City had been in place since the Union Alliance was banned. Recently, the Everlasting Pavilion and the Union Alliance had been attacking fiercely. After the city protecting formation was activated, no one else could get close to Sun City. Apart from the strict inspection needed to enter Sun City, there was also the Everlasting Pavilion's forces stationed at the city gates. Anyone who wanted to enter Sun City had to go through this first. Hence, they could not get close to Sun City. Chapter 5770. This subordinate is also puzzled. "It was a guest who came to find us and then asked us to report to you." The person answered truthfully. "Where is he?" Tian Xingyi could not help but frown. "On the second ancient street." According to the report, Tian Xingyi and Kong Xinmu came to the second ancient street and saw a young man in white waiting there. As soon as the two came over, the young man seemed to have sensed them and turned around. "It's you." Tian Xingyi still remembered this young man. He had a chance to go to Shangzhou City once. Although he did not see the city lord, he saw this young man. In a way, this young man was the current acting city lord of Shangzhou City. Junior Purple Jade greets the Skyline Palace Lord. The young man bowed. Then, he looked at Kong Xinmu and smiled. "You are Kong Xinmu, right?" Kong Xinmu searched his memory but did not remember seeing this young man called Purple Jade. However, from the looks of it, the other party seemed to know him. Kong Shinmu, the Scarlet Genius who flattened the ancient desolate city. Many of us in Shangzhou City have heard of your name. Purple Jade saw Kong Shinmu's reaction and knew what Kong Shinmu was thinking, so it gave him a simple explanation. It would have been better if Purple Jade did not explain, but Kong Shinmu was even more confused after hearing it. Flattening the ancient desolate city was already a bit exaggerated. What about the Scarlet Genius? How did he become a Scarlet Genius? Did they have to add a prefix to the word genius these days? My name is not really my given name. Just call me Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu did not hide anything and admitted his identity. Allow me to call you Brother Jiang. Purple Jade smiled politely. After some small talk, Purple Jade's expression turned serious. Skyline Palace Lord, Brother Jiang, I came to Sun City mainly for the Everlasting Pavilion's alliance. Purple Jade knew the City Lord's intentions the best. The City Lord had always respected Tianyuan Palace. Of the so-called four great sects in the Outer Realm, the City Lord only acknowledged the Heavenly Origin Palace. Now that the Heavenly Yuan Palace had encountered trouble, they naturally could not stand idly by. Even though the City Lord had yet to return to the city, he was on his way back. Compared to this matter, Tian Xingyi and Kong Shinmu were more concerned about how Purple Jade had entered the city. Kong Shinmu found that he could not see through the cub's cultivation. He felt that it should have an extraordinary domain power. The Divine Spirit Territory was a rare territory power. If even the Divine Spirit Territory could not sense the territory power, then either the territory power was of a higher grade than the Divine Spirit Territory, or the cultivator was very strong. This was the Outer Realm, where experts were as common as clouds. It was not impossible for these two things to happen at the same time. In particular, the cub had passed through the Wuxia Pavilion's encirclement and entered Sun City. By the way, there's something I haven't told you yet. At this point, the cub glanced at the situation at the gate of Yang City. The Wuxia Pavilion's people are everywhere at the gate of Sun City, and there are also people from the United Alliance around. I could only use some methods to enter the city, please forgive me. This time, the cub came here mainly to show Tian Xingyi the attitude of Upper Prefecture City. The City Lord of Upper Prefecture City, Xian Che, had already rushed back after learning of the crisis that the Heavenly Yuan Palace was facing. However, he was afraid that something unexpected would happen, so he sent the cub here. No problem. Tian Xingyi smiled. Thank you, City Lord Xian Che. Tian Xingyi had never seen Xian Che before, and he could not understand why he would help the Heavenly Yuan Palace. After the cub finished explaining, it left. After taking 2 steps, his aura was no longer in the surrounding space. It was as if this person had never appeared. It was even strange. This cub, Tian Xingyi frowned. Kong Shinmu heard this and looked at Tian Xingyi, waiting for him to continue. I don't know either. Tian Xingyi thought for a while, but he had no information about the cub. Not only the cub, but also that City Lord Xian Che. It's not an exaggeration to say that this time, the Heavenly Yuan Palace will not be able to hide. I am very grateful that the Upper Prefecture City came to help, but I'm afraid that it will implicate them. Tian Xingyi still felt that this matter was inappropriate. Perhaps they have friends or relatives that are related to the Heavenly Yuan Palace, Kong Shinmu said after thinking for a while. It's not impossible. Tian Xingyi thought about Kong Shinmu and agreed with Kong Shinmu's words. At the same time, an uninvited guest arrived outside the city gates of Yang City. The person who came was tall and burly, with an unshaven beard. His clothes were very ordinary, and even looked a little shabby. He called himself Yu Hongfeng. Just by looking at his appearance, one could roughly guess that he was a rogue cultivator. However, after revealing the name Yu Hongfeng, everyone, including Nangong Fengyu, had a change of attitude towards this person. Yu Hongfeng was one of the top 10 experts of the outer region. The 10 of the top 10 experts were publicly acknowledged to be existences equivalent to the 4 great sects in the outer realms, and their rankings were not separated by rank. Yu Hongfeng was on the list of the top 10 experts. Are you really Yu Hongfeng? Nangong Fengyu looked at the person in front of her in surprise. Behind him, the other disciples of the Everlasting Pavilion were also sizing him up. No matter how they looked at him, he did not look like an expert. Instead, he looked like a madman pretending to be crazy. After all, in the past 2 years, there were many people who swindled people using the name of the top 10 experts. Just like the people of the Everlasting Pavilion, the guards of Yang City were also paying attention to Yu Hongfeng. Yu Hongfeng might be alone, but if the person at the city gates was really one of the top 10 experts, it would be a serious matter. Are you guys questioning my identity? Yu Hongfeng looked at Nangong Fengyu in confusion. Nangong Fengyu? He recognized Nangong Fengyu. Nangong Fengyu was not surprised at all. It's good that you recognize him. The other disciples of the Everlasting Pavilion said in unison. Elder Nangong Fengyu was an expert of the Everlasting Pavilion. Her name was known far and wide. Not to mention the outer region, even in the Duan region, there were only a few people who did not know Nangong Fengyu's name. Oh. Yu Hongfeng replied indifferently. He did not even look at Nangong Fengyu anymore. Nangong Fengyu's face instantly darkened. What an arrogant brat. Nangong Fengyu said coldly. How can you say that? What brat? Are you blind or illiterate? Which eye of yours sees that I look like a brat? Yu Hongfeng glared at Nangong Fengyu unhappily. Nangong Fengyu, aren't you just relying on the Nangong clan to support you? Who do you think you are after leaving the Nangong clan? What did you say? Nangong Fengyu hated it when people talked about him like that. Am I wrong? Are you relying on the Everlasting Pavilion? Yu Hongfeng raised his eyebrows. He even sat in the base set up by the Everlasting Pavilion and crossed his legs leisurely. Chapter 57-71. Senior Yu Hongfeng is one of the 10 great experts. How could he be such an uncultured person? A disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion shouted as he was dissatisfied with Yu Hongfeng's current behavior. Yu Hongfeng glanced at the person who spoke. Am I Yu Hongfeng? Can't you just fight with me? Come on. However, we don't need our elders to deal with you. Any one of us here can beat you up. The disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion laughed impudently. In response, Yu Hongfeng faintly smiled. The disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion made the first move. Yu Hongfeng then said slowly, everyone can see that your people attacked first. It wasn't my intention. The disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion who made the first move treated it as a joke. However, in the next moment, his mocking smile froze on his face forever. Even the disciple himself maintained his previous posture and fell to the ground. No one saw when Yu Hongfeng made his move or what technique he used. They only saw the disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion fall. Nangong Fengyu couldn't help but frown when she saw this scene. Just a moment ago, she had indeed sensed an obscure power passing through the air. However, it was so fast that even she couldn't catch it. Even if she wasn't by her side, she could clearly sense that the disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion was already dead. Although it was only a supreme expert at the 4th level of supreme divine power, Yu Hongfeng had instantly killed this disciple. This was enough to prove that he was Yu Hongfeng. Yu Hongfeng, what are you here for? Nangong Fengyu realized that this person was Yu Hongfeng and couldn't help but question his purpose of coming here. Isn't it obvious enough? I'm here to watch the show. Yu Hongfeng shrugged his shoulders innocently. Hearing that Yu Hongfeng was only here to watch the show, Nangong Fengyu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She wasn't afraid of Yu Hongfeng. If Yu Hongfeng wanted to interfere in this matter, it would only make things more troublesome. But speaking of which, just Yu Hongfeng alone was not enough to threaten them. It was just that it was better to have less trouble. But your everlasting pavilion is so overbearing, Yu Hongfeng said again. There was a hint of helplessness in his tone, and he even let out a long sigh. As Yu Hongfeng spoke, he stood up and strode in the direction of Yang City. Yu Hongfeng, don't play the fool here. I think your goal from the beginning was Yang City. Nangong Fengyu's eyes narrowed. It should be the Heavenly Origin Palace. You 10 experts are the embodiment of righteousness. The thing you like to do the most is to help the weak. Nangong Fengyu's words were very clear. Not only Yu Hongfeng, but the other 10 great experts would also appear to help the Heaven Yuan Palace. After all, everyone in the Outer Realm knew that the 10 great experts loved to help the weak. Now that Heavenly Yuan Palace was surrounded by enemies and faced a crisis of life and death, it was not just Yu Hongfeng. The other 9 experts would definitely appear as well. Elder Nangong's words are too absolute. Suddenly, a voice filled with laughter rang out from the side. This signature smile belonged to Mao Tianyu. Mao Tianyu, why have you come to join in the fun? Yu Hongfeng could not help but frown when he heard the voice. As he spoke, he had already slapped in the direction of the voice. The seemingly light palm drew in all the spiritual power in the air in front of it and condensed it into a long sword that pierced out. If you can come, why can't I? Mao Tianyu still spoke with a smile. He quickly neutralized Yu Hongfeng's attack and appeared in front of everyone. Unlike Yu Hongfeng's external appearance, Mao Tianyu's appearance had an imposing aura, and he was dressed much more luxuriously than Yu Hongfeng. He became the focus of the crowd as soon as he arrived. Elder Nangong, long time no see. The first person Mao Tianyu greeted was Nangong Fengyu. Nangong Fengyu also greeted him with a smile. From the looks of it, they seemed to be old friends who had not seen each other for a long time. Yu Hongfeng, you have to think it through. Mao Tianyu turned around and smiled at Yu Hongfeng as he said indifferently. His words were already very clear. Once Yu Hongfeng chose to enter Yang City, they would be enemies from then on. What's there to think about? There are many cities in the outer region, but I only remember the name Yang City. Yu Hongfeng threw down a sentence and headed straight for Yang City. Open the door. Yu Hongfeng shouted loudly. Coincidentally, at this moment, Tian Xingyi and Kang Xinmu came over. Tian Xingyi and Kang Xinmu personally welcomed Yu Hongfeng. In fact, Yu Hongfeng did not have much contact with Sky Yuan Palace. In fact, Yu Hongfeng had never been to Sky Yuan Palace before. At most, he had come to Yang City once, and he had only passed by. However, Tian Xingyi knew Yu Hongfeng's character and knew that he was a trustworthy person. Just like how Tian Xingyi trusted Yu Hongfeng also trusted Sky Yuan Palace. In Yu Hongfeng's eyes, among the 4 great sects in the outer region, only Sky Yuan Palace was qualified. The other 3 were not worthy at all. Whether it was after the incident in the outer region many years ago or now, Yu Hongfeng had always thought so. This time, when he heard that Sky Yuan Palace was in trouble, he headed straight for Yang City. Please. Tian Xingyi invited Yu Hongfeng into Yang City. Where's Che? As soon as he entered the city, Yu Hongfeng had a clear view of the current situation in Yang City. He originally thought that Che would be in Yang City, but now it seemed that he was not in Yang City. He's not here, Tian Xingyi said after thinking for a moment. Che was also one of the top 10 experts. You're the first warrior, Tian Xingyi said jokingly when he saw Yu Hongfeng's surprised expression. That's not right. Che should be the first warrior. Yu Hongfeng tacitly agreed with the term warrior. He furrowed his brows, as if he could not understand why Che had not come to Yang City yet. Sky Yuan Palace's current situation, everyone knows. Tian Xingyi smiled bitterly. Let me introduce you. This is my junior brother, Kong Xinmu. Tian Xingyi gave a simple introduction. This is one of the top 10 experts, Yu Hongfeng. Kong Xinmu, I heard about him on the way here. They say he's a crimson genius. Yu Hongfeng sized up Kong Xinmu and nodded repeatedly. He's indeed a genius. Kong Xinmu had a strange expression. He did not know who started the rumor. Of all the things, why did they have to say a crimson genius? With a crimson genius, we'll be safe this time. Yu Hongfeng was a straightforward person and spoke very directly. He could see the situation of Kong Xinmu's cultivation. Looking at Kong Xinmu's posture, he should have just condensed his domain power not long ago. There was a scorching aura around him, most likely a domain power related to flames. Looking at Kong Xinmu's talent and the fact that he was a crimson genius, the flame he cultivated was not an ordinary flame. It was very likely a heaven and earth sacred flame, a god spirit flame. If it was a god spirit flame, then his domain power should be a god spirit domain. Chapter 57-72. Speaking of which, the current situation of the Heavenly Origin Palace has been around for hundreds of years. Yu Hongfeng spent most of his time outside and often went to the Nightmare region. The Outer Realm and the Nightmare region were two different worlds, but because some of the Allied Alliance's members were in the Outer Realm, the Nightmare region had used a certain method to open a passage between the two worlds. Even ordinary supreme cultivators could travel between the Outer Realm and the Nightmare region through the passage. However, the number of ordinary supreme cultivators passing through each time was limited. They needed to be accompanied and guarded by high-ranking supreme cultivators. Although there was a passage between the two worlds, it was very long. There was no guarantee that one would encounter any danger during the passage. Even high-ranking supreme cultivators had to be careful when passing through the passage. This was a passage that spanned two worlds. It passed through layers of space, and the most difficult opponent to deal with was the spatial storm. Of course, the top 10 experts could pass through the passage on their own. Ever since the passage had been opened, it wasn't just Yu Hongfeng. The other top 10 experts had more or less gone to the Nightmare region. The Nightmare region and the Outer Realm were two different worlds. But before the incident in the Outer Realm, there had been a parallel space layer between the Nightmare region and the Outer Realm. The existence of that space layer was equivalent to the gate of contract between this world and the other world. Unlike the contract gate, that spatial layer was always open. Any cultivator could sense the spatial layer and pass through it. However, after the matter that concerned the life and death of the Outer Realm happened, the space layer also disappeared. Later, some people had searched for it, including the top 10 experts. Unfortunately, they hadn't found it. Some people guessed that the space layer had disappeared with the Great Battle. This theory was gradually accepted by everyone. After all, even the top 10 experts couldn't find the space layer. No one could guarantee that it still existed. However, some people believed that it still existed. The top 10 experts hadn't found it, but only for the time being. In other words, the space layer was like some special secret realms that constantly moved through space. The reason why they couldn't find it might be because they had encountered it and moved to another world. In any case, the space layer didn't exist for the time being. There was now a new passage connecting the two worlds. Hearing Yu Hongfeng's words, Tian Xingyi sighed helplessly. He had already sensed what Yu Hongfeng had said. That was why they had sent people to the other world hundreds of years ago. Before leaving Heavenly Yuan Palace, Senior Jiang Shu had said that if Heavenly Yuan Palace was in danger in the future, they could go to the other realm to look for him. The disciple who had gone to the other world had already been gone for 100 years, and there had been no news from him until now. No one knew how the disciple was doing. Let's not worry about this for now. Let's get through this crisis first. Yu Hongfeng casually walked forward. Che really didn't come? However, Yu Hongfeng still felt that this was inconceivable. Based on his understanding of Clear, it was impossible that Clear had not made a move yet. As Kang Xinmu pondered the Che Yu Hongfeng mentioned, he automatically thought of Shangzhou City's city lord, Xin Che. Seeing Tian Xingyi's confused expression, Yu Hongfeng quickly reacted. I almost forgot. Ever since Che faded out, he called himself Xin Che. Yu Hongfeng slapped his forehead. You mean Upper Continent City Lord Xin Che? Tian Xingyi finally reacted. Seeing Yu Hongfeng nod his head, Tian Xingyi smiled and said, Upper Continent City has already sent someone. This time, I have to thank you. I came here because my opponent is in the Nangong family. However, he is like a turtle hiding in its shell, not daring to show himself. Yu Hongfeng raised his eyebrows. This time, I want to make the everlasting pavilion unhappy. That way, I will feel better. From this, one could basically see Yu Hongfeng's way of doing things. He had always been straightforward, saying whatever he wanted to say, never hiding anything. This time, his goal was simply to make the everlasting pavilion unhappy, and also to teach the arrogant Nangong family a lesson. As for Xin Che, I remember that he once said that he owed Su Guang a favor. This time, he will not just stand by and watch, Yu Hongfeng said after thinking for a moment. Now, Tian Xingyi understood why Xin Che was in the same position as them. I'm coming. At this moment, a clear voice suddenly rang out. Then, a green figure appeared from the side of the space. The three people present, including Kang Xinmu, only felt a slight distortion in the space. Xin Che, I thought you weren't coming. Yu Hongfeng laughed and went forward to greet him. I may be late, but I will definitely not be absent. Xin Che laughed heartily. Xin Che and Purple Jade were handsome men with the same temperament. Just from his appearance, he looked more like a refined scholar. What made Kang Xinmu feel a little uncomfortable was that even Xin Che knew that he was a scarlet genius. He could not help but sigh at the person who spread the rumor. Even he himself almost believed that he was a scarlet genius. After the few people exchanged greetings, a scout came to report that the Upper Continent City had already sent a representative to challenge them. Kang Xinmu followed the few people to the city gate once again. They stood on the city wall, which was dozens of feet high. At a glance, they saw the person who was challenging them. It was Upper Continent City's Purple Jade. Purple Jade held a white jade folding fan and pointed it at Nangong Fengyu. The atmosphere between the two of them was extremely tense, and it looked like they were about to fight. Purple Jade, let your city lord speak. Nangong Fengyu knew Purple Jade from Upper Continent City. Although this kid was young and looked quite well behaved, his methods were extremely cruel. However, no matter what, Purple Jade was just a follower of Upper Continent City's city lord and was not qualified to clamor here. Is there something wrong with your brain? The entire outer territory knows that at this stage, I am the city lord of Upper Continent City. I didn't ask your pavilion master to confront me in person because I sympathize with his legs. What are you doing here? The tone of Purple Jade's words made Kang Xinmu involuntarily think of a person. Xin Che seemed to have seen through Kang Xinmu's thoughts and said, Purple Jade has always been close to Tang Xiaoyu. Kang Xinmu nodded. No wonder the two looked so similar. It turned out that they were friends. Looking at the time, the Wuji Pavilion should be in chaos now. We should also prepare to fight back, Xin Che said solemnly. Almost as soon as Xin Che's voice fell, news came from the Wuji Pavilion outside the city gate. It said that a large number of unknown people had invaded the Wuji Pavilion, and that one person had broken into the Wuji Pavilion's cultivation secret realm, interfered with the secret technique elders who were about to come out of seclusion, and even sealed the exit of the secret realm. The exit was sealed from the secret realm? Nangong Fengyu's eyes widened when she heard this and shouted angrily, "Do you think this is possible? Don't they need to come out?"